Good evening, everyone. I call this special meeting of the Conroe Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. Today is Tuesday, August 4th, 2026, and the time is 5 p.m. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, both here and in person and online. The invocation this evening will be offered by Trustee Dungan and the pledges by Trustee May. Please join us.
Let's bow our heads and pray. Dear God, thank you for your abundance, Lord, your blessings on this district. Thank you for giving us another school year ahead to look forward to. God, we ask that you just be with every educator and staff member as they prepare for next week, Lord, when we welcome our students back to campus, Lord. Just ask that you be with the families as they prepare their children to come back and to learn. Just be with us as we go throughout this meeting. Guard and guide our conversations, Lord. Allow us to keep our focus on the things that are important to this district, Lord, and just ask that you be with us as we continue to conduct the business of the district. And thank you for the leadership here. And just ask that you continue to bless them, guide and guard them, Lord, and lead this district to newer heights, Lord, as we move into a new school year. Just your continued hedge of protection around our campuses and all that are in them. Lord, we thank you for everything you've given us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. The next item on our agenda is a closed session item, but the board feels the information is very important. We feel like it would be a learning experience for everyone to hear what we already have experienced before but are getting renewed on. So at this time, we will go ahead and discuss board member roles and responsibilities in connection with the budget adoption as posted on the agenda. And there's no voting on it. It's just open training and information and discussion. So at this time, I believe Ms. Ballou and Ms. Garza, or everyone coming, and Mr. Broussard? Yes, no? I don't know who's coming up. Okay, thank you. We're a little on the fly since we've made changes.
Good afternoon, ladies. I wanted to make sure before we start today that you go ahead and pull, if you can, this worksheet out. It's called Conroe ISD Budget 2026-2027. Does everybody have that document? Okay. And then we'll also be looking at these slides. I just want to thank so much the wonderful staff. We worked really hard on putting this presentation together, and a couple of the things that you had charged us with is trying to make sure it was really clear to you and to the public, especially the tax rates you're voting on and some of those things. So we worked very collaboratively, and I want to thank Karen a lot. I am going to focus as your general counsel on talking to you about some of the board duties, and then one of the things that you'd want me to discuss with you is how the state determines how much money Conroe ISD is entitled to each year. So how do those formulas work? So I'm going to cover the state system and how it's determining by formula how much money you're entitled to. Karen is then going to cover once you get that money, she's putting it into a budget, and then you have to adopt that budget, obviously, and the tax rates. So that's going to kind of be how we're going to proceed today. So what this really is a training. I am your general counsel, but I also, as you know, train boards, and we're doing this as a, kind of a training, so you'll receive some training hours for this. But we're going to focus first just on your responsibilities. I know you know these responsibilities, but sometimes talking about them out loud, because you have a $900 million budget. It's very sizable. You have 58,000 children on average in your school system every single day. It might be a little bit more than that. Is it 58?
Well, that's our regular program.
Yeah, regular program. Just a tremendous responsibility, and you as fiduciaries, we want to make sure you understand. I do as your general counsel. So every single year, you're responsible for adopting a budget. You are going to be adopting your budget, if all goes well, on August 18th. You do have to make a budget and adopt it by September 1st. So you'll be doing that. You also will be voting on your tax rate, and we're going to go through the components, each one of them, of your tax rate this evening, so you'll really understand why that tax rate's being calculated and how it's being calculated. Hopefully, we tried to make school finance easy. It might be something nobody can achieve. And then you have to ensure there's an annual independent audit of your school district finances, and that audit actually goes to the Texas Education Agency, and they utilize it to come out with a report. It's called the FIRST report, Financial Integrity Rating Systems. And so you guys actually get a grade every single year from TEA on how your financial systems are operating. So that's a little bit about that audit. Then you are in charge of, and you guys have been working very, very hard on these policies. You're charged with setting contracting and purchasing processes for your school district. So one of the things that you as a board have been thinking a lot about is how much you want to delegate to the superintendent and staff, and how much you guys want to retain as far as looking at your contracting and improving your purchases and stuff like that. You can delegate some of that to the superintendent, and so that's what's happening. And then throughout the entire year, you are supposed to be monitoring fiscal performance. So that's just an ongoing duty at all times. And I know that you have your finance committee, and you actually have a new internal auditor, and are working on some audit things. So I think that that's all part of your fiduciary duties. Then there's the part that's really the shared part, and that's where Karen, your wonderful CFO, comes in. And she is sharing the duty of preparing your budget for you. So the superintendent is charged in law with preparing the budget for you and providing it to you. So she's going to go through the budget tonight so that you can ask some questions about it. And then once your budget is adopted, the superintendent administers the budget on a day-to-day basis. But one thing I'll mention at the top is that it says actually in law that everybody in the district is responsible for administrating the budget in accordance with your policies. So you guys have been doing some policy work, and then once you do that policy work and you adopt different policies related to your budget or purchasing or how we're going to account for funds, all of these kinds of things, then Karen has to take those policies and use them in developing the district budget. So your policies are impacting your budget decisions. So those are kind of the shared roles. Karen, do you have anything to add to the board responsibilities that you think we need?
You're
Okay,
doing great.
Okay, perfect. Any questions about those responsibilities? Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, now we're going to start digging into how your funding amounts are actually determined by the state of Texas. So how much you as a district are entitled to each year is being determined by the state. And it's being determined by a complex set of formulas, but we're going to go ahead and try to walk through those formulas a little bit tonight. The biggest single piece, and I want to also say, this is totally excluding federal funding. It's also excluding food service. What we're focused on tonight is the state's big foundation school program, which is the state of Texas's method for ensuring districts receive an entitlement to a particular amount of money. Can
I stop you?
Of course.
Ms. Garza, can you point out that our federal funding only accounts for less than 8% of our overall budget?
I believe it's more than that. I can get you a number, but it's in the
Is it
$50
still
to
less
$60
than
million
10?
number. It's much larger than that.
I thought it was 20,
Yeah.
almost 20. I thought it was almost 20%.
We can get those numbers.
Okay,
for you.
thank
Yeah, I'd like to have that tonight.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so the first big thing that happens is the state is going to calculate what's called your Tier 1 entitlement. And I want to walk through for just a moment what that entitlement is. So it actually starts on page 2 of your packet, your bigger packet. And and we're starting with the entitlements. And what I would like you to do is just take a moment and read, it says allotments tier 1, and it's at the bottom of page 2. And I would like you to just...
Hold on one second,
Yes.
Ms. Ballou, I am so sorry. Just for the public, I want to go ahead and state this presentation and these handouts have already been made public on our website.
Yes.
With the packet. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure people knew that it's there.
That
If
it's
they wanted-
available.
if
Absolutely.
After tonight's meeting or when they're watching it and streaming it later, they'll be able to get it. I'm so
Absolutely.
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure we said that.
No, that's perfect. What I would like you to do, and I know, but we're treating this as a training, and so in a training, what I would ask you to do is try to look at the document and internalize it for a few minutes. And so I would like you to look at the bottom of page 2. That's where your Tier 1 entitlements start. And you can see on that row 21, I'm just going to do a little bit of table setting, but then I want you to spend some time just looking at the allotments. The very first allotment is by far your largest allotment. It might be around 50% of your budget is this one calculation that is being made here. And so this is called your regular program allotment. And how that is being calculated is on the very first page of this document, it says that you have 58,000 students on average at school each day, just regular students. You just have 58,000 regular students. They don't have any special needs or other factors. There's 58,000 of them in your school each day. You take that 58,000 times the basic allotment, and the basic allotment is on row 17. And that basic allotment amount is $6,215. So if you take 58,000 students, regular students in average daily attendance, times the basic allotment of $6,215, you come up with $363 million. Do you see that on that sheet? Okay. So that alone is about 50% usually of your formulas, roughly your overall formulas, your regular program allotment is going to be that, and that's just that one calculation. And essentially what the legislature is saying is how many kids do we have that are just kind of regular children times the basic allotment. Now we come up with the largest portion of your money. So if you will just look at that second row, we put it on here, and this was a request of some of you, well, how can the board spend that money? Because again, this is your money, you adopt it. You're adopting a budget, and you're determining how this money is going to be allocated, this $363 million. And what this is saying is that there's no restrictions. So the state is not restricting you. You can spend this money however you choose as long as it's legal. Now you have a ton of legal obligations to meet and a lot of things you have to accomplish, but in many of these allotments there are very, very strict guidelines, but this is one allotment where you have a little bit more discretion. So what I wanted to do is have you just spend a few minutes going from page 2 and then the allotments and with line 47. So they end with line 47, and that is on page 7. So if you'll just spend a couple minutes looking at all of these allotments, and then we'll see, I'm going to point some things out to you and see if we can answer any of your questions. But again, for each one, you're seeing the allotment, how it's being calculated, and how the money has to be used.
Can we ask questions so we see?
I was going to give everybody just a little bit of time to digest, but yes, I welcome any questions that you have. Just look up when you kind of feel like you are ready. I did want to give you a minute because it's hard to get through this if you don't haven't internalized any of it.
I do want to say, this is really nice to see it broken down in this route. We've seen, most of us have seen all of this in the past through trainings and so forth, but seeing it broken down by the line and what it can be used for and what it can't and what's restricted really helps make it much clearer. Thank you.
Well, you guys requested that, and I thought those were wonderful ideas, and I thought they were very, really thoughtful in thinking about all the money that you have and how you intend to budget it. So with that, does anybody have any questions just before I kind of proceed?
With the overall Conroe ISD budget, I'm assuming that we are in compliance with meeting all of those.
Yes, that is one of the things that we look at as we're preparing the budget, because there are maintenance of effort requirements for some of the allotments where we have to spend a certain percentage of it specifically on students that generate that allotment. So that those are things that we do track internally.
I had a question about our special education students as it relates to the regular program allotment. So I noticed none of our special education students are in that first big tier, correct?
That is correct.
And can you explain to everybody why that is? And yeah.
Right. So if you take, we'll back up and start at our projected enrollment. So we're using 72,800 students as our projected enrollment. We're going to apply a 93% average daily attendance to that. That gets us to 67,704. So you might be wondering, well, why is this number so much lower than 67,704? And we've talked about this in the past, that we call it the disability penalty. So those students that are in those special education settings, we convert those to what's called FTEs for the amount of time that they're spending away from the regular classroom, and that FTE total is then subtracted from the 67,704 to get to what's referred as to the regular program allotment. So we are losing funding in the basic allotment, in the regular program allotment, because those students are leaving the classroom for 45 minutes a day to attend whatever it is they need, speech therapy, whatever the case may be. So we are being penalized in the basic allotment, whereas the teacher's still there. She still has a classroom full of students that are teaching. We still have to pay the teacher's salary, even though they're being pulled out for additional services. So that's why that number looks so different.
In the new SPED formula, did they fix the proportionality of it at least?
Not that I'm aware.
No. So as we head into the legislative priorities, I mean, that's something to think about. It made a lot of people
And that
nervous that we
penalty,
talked about it,
yes,
but
that penalty for us equates to about $20 million in lost funding.
thank you.
And just to point out, those students that we lose a portion of the penalty that we get for identifying them, they're still there. They're
Correct.
still in the air-conditioned building. They're
Correct.
still going to PE. They're still going to their specials of all different levels. They just might get 45 minutes somewhere else or 30 minutes
Right.
somewhere else.
They're built into our staffing formulas, so we're staffing teachers at 22-1 at the elementary to put teachers in those classrooms regardless, whether
Okay.
they're out 45 minutes or an hour and a half. Yes.
Thank you, because as Trustee May was just saying, when we were there in Austin the last legislative session, it was a shock to many of the people we talked to. They didn't even realize it.
Right.
So, thank you.
Yeah, this is not a point that's ever been made before. So you're saying FTE. What is it?
So they're converting them basically to a full-time student. So if you're spending 45 minutes outside of the classroom, they're consolidating all of those 45 minutes together and dividing them by a 6-hour day, I believe, to convert it to one full-time equivalent student so that they can reduce that regular program allotment accordingly. And then
So-
weighted funding is then also derived from that as well, based on that instructional setting. Because every one of those instructional setting has a weighted funding, whether it be speech therapy or there's a weighted funding associated with that. So they use that same FTE calculation then to apply the weighted funding, but then it's then used to reduce it from that regular program allotment as well.
And
So does, I wasn't done, hang on. So does that weighted funding fulfill that missed basic allotment?
No.
How far,
So
I mean,
that is
how
part
far
of,
apart are those?
that is part of our $89 million allotment that we receive for special education, but we're spending or allocating about $118 million.
So by
to
doing it
service
this
those
way,
students.
we're losing out on that basic allotment, and that's not
Correct.
made up
Correct.
anywhere else. So you said, I think, 20 million deficit this creates,
Yes.
this alone creates. Do we have to do that by law? Do we have to calculate it this way?
Those are, the state calculates that for us based on PEMS data that's reported to them every year. So that's a calculation we don't control.
We
So
don't
we
control.
we control our PEMS data, but the state then takes that data and puts it in the formulas and applies it.
Well,
according
essentially,
to
we
the-
control it by identifying the students, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Which is the right thing to do.
Yes.
Oh, I don't disagree.
Yeah,
I'm just pointing out that this is how we arrive at this point.
I have a quick question because you said a $20 million loss, but in other presentations, and I believe the one that you're giving later, it says that we have a $40 million funding gap. Is it
Right,
20
so
or 40?
that, what I'm referring to is what they're reducing the regular program allotment by for these kids that are being pulled out. So we're losing it in the regular program allotment, they're then putting it into what they call the special education allotment, but that allotment in and of itself is supposed to cover the cost of servicing our special education students, and in reality, we're only required to spend 55% of that on special education students, but we're spending well in excess of 100% of that allotment. That's where that gap is. We've got 89 million, we're spending 100, I believe it's 118 is what was on the legislative priorities graphic that we put together. So there's where the funding gap is.
So historically, up until this last legislative session, when they changed to the tiered approach for special education was considered a place. And would you say that that's why this formulation was
Correct.
calculated in this
Correct.
capacity? Yeah, because you would be going there with the assumption that you would be there all day.
Right. It's an instructional
Right.
setting.
But that, so it's been well overdue for the change to the tiered model, because it hasn't been that way for a very long time.
I just have one more question about it, and I won't go down the rabbit hole too much deeper on this, but proportionality was what we kind of thought was the consolation prize on that, right? It's not fixing it completely, but it was like getting it in a better place. Is that not Commissioner's role? Because we were told, I thought Commissioner
Well,
Rath
when
could
you say
fix that.
proportionality, are you talking about different weights for different instructional settings? I mean,
Yeah, so then the dyslexic students, for instance, they're out of their classroom for 45 minutes a day, aren't losing half of their basic allotment. So it's proportional. Isn't that still a better situation than losing the entire, half of it
That is
for
good.
all students, SPED students? So is that Commissioner's role? Can he fix that? Can we find out?
It depends on who you talk to. I'm sure.
I mean, it's in statute. I mean, the formulas are in
Yes,
statute.
and
formulas are in
proportionality is
statute.
in the statute, and they're not following the statute. We identified that. It's just, it is a place that I think you have a good relationship with Commissioner Rath. Maybe you can run that
No,
down.
the thing is that, they've tried to do these tiers of funding. And, I think it's a very good step forward to try to look at it because they do cost differently in terms of the services that we provide. But they gave a bucket of money and they said, we're not going to go over this money. So we're going to be able to provide all this stuff, but then there's a limit to the pot that you're going to have as far as the funding goes. And so as it relates to all of it, those are the kind of things that we're looking towards and need to have fully funded. And one of the things that we decided we're going to do this year is be very clear about what those values are, what it really does cost, and where we're at in this process. I was talking to Trustee Horn aside is that, this is something that's concerned me as these services have grown so much over the last 5 or 6 years that, we need to be able to provide these services to these kids. I mean, there's a need for it, so fund it.
I just don't think they're following the statute.
No, they
So,
don't.
anyway. that is
It's
what it is.
good to point
Correct.
that out.
Yeah.
That's what you meant to say, yes, correct.
So I wanted to point out, actually on special education, that's at line 23. We've already hit on that there's a funding gap. Karen went through and on any of these where the amount of money that you are entitled to is insufficient to pay for what you're required to do. Anytime that's happening, what's noted on this sheet is it says, note, this allotment does not cover Conroe ISD's actual costs to meet state requirements. The board must close the funding gap. So in special education, because you're receiving only about between 87 and 89 million dollars, but it's actually costing 118 million dollars. Okay, that's a gap of around 30 million. Okay, well, you guys have to go somewhere else in tier 1. So in all these allotments, you have to go somewhere else to fill that gap. And that gap exists in some of your, it definitely exists in your 23, your special education and your dyslexic allotment. But then, your early education. And these are things that I know you guys wanted to hear about this because you're trying to set your legislative priorities and really think about what's best for the district. Is which one of these allotments are you underfunded? It's a well-known fact statewide on line 36 is transportation. So you're being provided $7 million, but the actual cost is roughly $27 million.
35.
So, 35. Yeah. So again, $30 million gap between, and that kind of makes sense because when you think about how large your student population is and how many children you have to transport daily for, many, many days, thinking that you could do that with $7 million, it's just not possible. So everywhere where the actual amount that the allotment is providing is less, and you guys had requested this less than you need, is right there. Are there any other questions about these Tier 1 allotments?
I have some questions. Let's see, what line is it? Sorry.
While she's pulling that up.
Sorry, I found it.
Okay, go ahead.
Line 32, fast growth allotment.
I have
How
that
is that determined?
So there's a statewide cap on it. It's $320 million. So it looks at a 6-year growth for all districts across the state and places districts into what they call tiers. We are currently in the Tier 1 funding for that. It's the top 40% of districts in terms of growth over 250 students. So that is one of the areas that I've got as a concern on a slide that you'll see in my presentation, because as we see our enrollment leveling off, that 6-year growth number is continuing to fall. And so we're competing with that growth number with districts across the state. So depending on where we land next year in terms of our growth compared to the Cadies, the Prospers, the Lamars, those are ones that were ahead of us last year, we could potentially drop into Tier 2 for that funding. And right now we're receiving 48% of the basic allotment times the number of students that we grow over 250 over that 6-year period. So depending on where we land, if we go to Tier 2, it drops down to 33% of the basic allotment. And so that could be a $5 to $9 million shift in funding just on that alone. But like I said, it depends on what all other districts are doing across the state, because it's a race against other districts that are growing as well to
Or
compete.
other districts that are losing
Correct,
students.
correct.
Okay. And then my other question, I've noticed some of these line items, you have to spend 100%, right? And then some of them are 55. How do they decide? It just seems really arbitrary. You have to spend 100%. You only in 55% in this category. Like,
Well, and the thing is that when you look at it, way back when, when we looked at what we spent for special ed funding, they were more simple and the services were less than they were. And, they were encouraging everybody to spend their dollars. And, the federal government spends about 35% of what you really need, and they're the ones who are federally mandating those kind of things, right? And it is a pretty arbitrary percentage. If you guess what it is, I'd give you money because I don't know what it is. Yeah, it's crazy.
And then, sorry, just one more question on the teacher incentive allotment. We get $5 million. Is there any way to increase that amount?
That is something that our steering committee is actively working on. I believe that all campuses will be participating in some form or fashion this year, so we have added $1 million to the budget for next year in anticipation of increased participation in that program.
So
we'll
that
be
is
at
something we can control, this
right.
dollar
We'll be at
amount.
5.2 million in projected allotment next year for the teacher incentive allotment.
And as far as salaries go, I will say the state really wants as many districts as possible participating in this program. It is the state's, if you will, incentive program for rewarding teachers as they are continuing to grow in their careers. It's money that essentially you're just a pass-through. It comes from the state and it passes straight through to the teacher as an additional salary. And because one of the reasons why the state, might not provide a across-the-board pay raise is because they're tending to use more this incentive allotment, and they want everybody to be focused on getting as many teachers on this incentive program as possible. Would you say? Yeah.
This is one of the questions, I'm sorry, are you done, Trustee Dawson? Which was one of my questions as well. You already answered my question, a couple of the others. But on the teacher incentive allotment, that is the route they are going. They're considering this the bonus structure. It's to reward those that are going above just what's required as far as their implementation of educational service to their kids, and incentivizing them to grow them even more. And they're not backing away from it. They're wanting to expand it.
Yes,
and we have to come up with the routes. Our district, HR, has to come up with the measurable, data-proven points that are approved by TEA, that are quantitative, that they can then say, yes, we agree with those data points, we agree with that growth, and we will give you the money for that incentive. And that is where last month when I was talking about this, that's why there's that 10% less of the pass-through to those teachers. It's because it takes
It's a very, very complicated process.
It's very complicated, time-consuming, and it takes resources from our district in order for us to provide that
Correct.
service and that ability. So that is why when I was mentioning this last month, there are a lot of districts that don't have that capability. And we don't really, that 10%, we would rather it being able to go to those teachers too. But we have to be able to do that work, and it has to be funded some way.
Correct.
I would really like our steering committee to work on trying to get them to do some sort of library database where we're sharing the state that has approved these data points for, say, music teachers, for art teachers. These aren't testing areas. We want to expand this as far as we can, as best as we can, to our teachers, because this is the only way they're going to keep giving us more money is through these programs. But we need to have help. And so if the state says we have to have all these things met and they have to be measurable, well, then let's all get together and share what's working,
Right.
what they agree, and have a library for districts to pull from in an effort to be able to reward our teachers that aren't just in testing areas.
Has the state not already thought of that? I'm
Well-
just saying, have they not?
The state's program,
there.
the program's been around, I believe, since 2019. The key thing for the state is they want to make sure that when they're giving these bonuses out, or they're actually additional salary, they're permanent salary increases for teachers that are, growing. They want to make sure it's being done fairly. And so they want you to provide really quantitative data, and it's a rigorous, very rigorous way of looking at, is the teacher actually improving student results over time? And I have worked with districts where if TEA, even after an entire year, the teachers can be really happy thinking they're going to receive their their bonus under this program or additional salary, and TEA will say, unfortunately, we just don't think your qualitative data is strong enough.
Yeah, we were there.
And so we will not, so it's just a very rigorous program, but I think the state's trying to do it so that it's being administered fairly.
And that's why I asked,
Yeah.
because we've firsthand experience
Yeah,
in that. So
yeah.
that's something I think is an afterthought when it should have been a part of the process and planning. So
Yeah.
Just a dangling carrot. Seems like a lot of districts have an issue with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They, by the way, ours got approved today.
great.
Oh, yay. Okay, are there any other?
I have
yep.
one question about that. Is there a possibility to change the education code in the upcoming legislature to make it more, there is, so this is something that is
Absolutely.
potentially on our, like as an attorney, you can look at the code and say, I can see an easy way to fix this?
There's been a lot of people who've also been thinking that the boards across the state might want to design their own system. So just more flexibility, period, because the idea would be with local control, you guys might have your own ideas about how to set up a quality incentive program. All those things are possible.
Could be a good
Sorry, Ms.
legislative priority.
It is on there as one of. Oh, well, we haven't decided on any, so yeah. So, Ms. Garza, I meant to ask you in advance, so I'm going to just give this to you to look at for down the road. And then when you get it, could you also put it with these slides for the public as well?
Sure.
Could you give us a, kind of like this, of where you get all the areas that we need, our budget requires, and if we were fully funded, what it would look like for our fully funding. I'd like to just see that chart and that total, because we all know the individual areas. We all know this information, but when we can see the full differential, it makes a big difference.
Right, there's actually a PEMS report that we can pull.
Perfect.
That
Thank
provides
you.
that data once our actual financial data is reported to TEA.
And then, like I said, make sure it goes with this online. Thank you.
Ms.
Okay.
Garza, when's that published?
So we will not have 25, 26 data until next spring, because we won't report our final financial data to them until after our ACFR is approved.
So well into the
So
legislative
we-
session.
Right, so we could provide the 24, 25 data.
But it's
to you.
irrelevant. I mean, it's not irrelevant, but it's not apples to apples maybe, because I'm just pointing out that because of the delay in the publishing, that information will be well into, they'll already have conversations
Right.
in the legislative
But
session.
we've identified the buckets, if you will, where there's major gaps in funding, like transportation, school safety, and of course, special education, and then teacher compensation.
Yeah.
And it's not just teacher compensation, it's
All
it's
compensation.
all
Staff,
compensation.
yes.
I mean, we have dedicated personnel that are doing yeoman's work and not being compensated where they should be, so.
Okay, so were there any other questions? I'm sorry, I didn't see any. Okay. So under the formulas, the state says you're owed $640 million. And then the next question the state says is, okay, Conroe ISD is entitled to $640,000. How are we going to pay for it? And we're going to pay for it both using state funds and local funds. So in this case, in order to pay for the $640,000 million, I wanted you to turn, if you want to, it's the chart on page 7 and 8. It's actually just really on 8. But that's how the state is having, ensuring that Conroe receives all the money that's entitled to. So the state is going to calculate what's called your maximum compressed rate. And that rate is 6171, so about 62 cents. So what the state is saying is, Conroe ISD, in order for you to receive your $640 million, you have to do your part and raise your share. So you have to tax every single piece of property, $100 of property, that tax rate of 6171. So that is how you're coming up with your local share to pay for Tier 1, and the total amount for that. If you do that tax rate calculation, you take your $57 billion of property divided by 100, and then times your tax rate of 6171, then you owe, or you have to collect in local property taxes, $352 million. So I hope that made some sense. I know that's a lot.
The thing to point out there is that's dictated.
It's dictated. So that 61 cent tax rate, 62, is dictated to you by TEA. You have no authority. You cannot change it. That is also a tax increase under truth in taxation. So you guys are going to be, we're going to talk about that, but you're going to have to make statements that you're increasing taxes. But that tax rate is being 100% dictated and given to you by TEA, and you cannot change it. Or if you tried to, you'd suffer, your children would suffer, because the financial penalty would be very, very significant. So what TEA is saying is you have to tax your citizens, your property owners, 6171, and raise $352 million.
Can you point to the 6171 where you're seeing that?
It's actually on a different, it's on,
I was looking at our handout.
yeah. I put those on a different slide. Your tax rates, I'm going to put the combined tax rate slide up here, but it's page 1 and 2 have just your tax rates in a table. And I'm going to put that table up in a minute, but I just want to make sure you kind of have a grasp of, how big that dollar amount is. So you guys are essentially being asked to raise 55% of the Tier 1 through your local property taxes. And then the state is saying, well, how much are you being given through the permanent school fund? You receive an amount of money, this goes way back in the Texas Constitution, so you receive an amount of money for every child you have. It's called the per capita distribution. And so the next thing the state says is, okay, well, Conroe's going to pay $342 million, or its property tax owners are. The state permanent school fund's going to pay $40 million. So what do we have left? And the state's saying what's left over is $248 million, and the state will pay that. So that's how that total $640 million that you'll receive next year in your entitlement is being paid for.
Can I ask, is the 55%, is that standard for each school district has to pay 55%?
No, so in a recapture district, for example, they would pay 100%. They would, and then a lot of the money that they were taxing would leave their district for recapture. On the flip side, in some extraordinarily property poor districts, the local property taxes, you can tax at the rate that TEA provides. You can't raise that much money, and so in that case, the state may pay 60-70%. I don't know if you have any intuition on what the average is.
I do not,
State-
but I mean, it's going to vary depending on what
varies.
that state calculated entitlement is, because it depends on your enrollment, it depends on your property wealth within your district. So there's a lot of variables that play into what that percentage actually ends up being.
And recapture was established what year?
1990,
It's been around a long
Late
time.
90s.
late 90s, yeah.
And that was the state's solution to funding the low property tax
Equalized
districts?
funding, yes.
Yeah, doing some equalized funding efforts.
Where did it come from before that? Do you remember?
Well, what happened is the school districts who were receiving a lot less money, they were taxing, they had high property taxes, but were receiving very little money because they didn't have a lot of property value, started saying there's too much of a disparity between, districts that can tax a little and raise a lot, and districts that can tax a lot and raise a little. And so the Texas Supreme Court at that point started stepping in and saying, if you're going to depend on property taxes to fund your school system, then you need to do some things to equalize these differences. And after several court cases, the legislature passed recapture, and the Texas Supreme Court blessed it, and so since then, recapture's been in place.
Because we were depending on property taxes.
Yes, it's
to
because,
fund our
and
schools.
it's very unequal across the
Okay.
state. I mean, the state of Texas is interesting, right? Because you're the largest rural educator, but then you have some of the wealthiest cities, largest urban cities and wealthiest cities in the United States, and you're trying to equalize things across a vast, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll say it this way in West Texas, like Sundown, they bought every teacher a house. And they would, they had 600 kids. They had an indoor swimming pool. They had, every kid was required to play band, and they bought them an instrument. And so it was just quite different. And so the thing was is that the oil companies would actually donate a lot of those things so you could keep the taxes low, because that was all revenue from petroleum. And so it was a very different world. It was enjoyable going there.
Sure.
Any other questions about, you guys feeling good? Okay. So now we're going to do the next part of the school finance formulas, which is Tier 2. So you have your Tier 1, and I want to just be really clear about this. You are supposed to, or the idea is anyway, that you would have enough money under Tier 1 to pay for all of your expenses that you're required to pay for. Tier 2 was designed to be discretionary enrichment funding that you could utilize to help your students and provide enrichment programs. It literally says enrichment programs for students. But what happens is, because many, many times there's not enough money in Tier 1 because of all these funding gaps that we're talking about, districts have to then use their Tier 2 money just to provide basic services. And so I want to point that out, because Karen would certainly tell you some of that goes on here or has gone on in the past, where you guys are having to use your enrichment dollars to pay for basic state services, and that is true at this time. Okay, so for Tier 1, you are charging 5 cents or 0.05. It's a small part of your budget, but it is discretionary, so you get to set the tax rate. And so here's what that looks like for Tier 1, Tier 2. So for Tier 2, as long as you are willing to tax, you can tax up to 5 cents without going to the voters in what's called a voter election. You don't have to do that. You can tax up to 5 cents. You guys are taking advantage of this Tier 2 tax. And so, again, the state is saying, all right, if you're willing to tax your citizens 5 additional cents, then we will make sure you have a guaranteed amount of money, and that amount of money is $61 million. So as long as, if you'll tax at 5 additional cents, we will ensure, or we're saying you're entitled to $61 million. The way that is being funded is $28 million is being paid for by you, or your taxpayers, through your 5 cent tax. So you can see that $28 million, and that's about 46%. And then the state's picking up the remaining amount of $33 million. So that is your Tier 2 funding.
This is annually, correct?
Annually, yep. We're just building your budget. So those are the first, those are the big blocks of it. It's Tier 1 and Tier 2. I know Tier 2 is a little bit confusing. Are there any questions or thoughts you guys have about it?
Are we going to get into the pennies and all of that? And
Well,
slides?
yeah, we're gonna go through your tax rate, but I kind of wanted to build it. So if you remember, the first part of your tax rate was your tax rate to pay for Tier 1. That was 62 cents. Now, this is the second part of your tax rate, the 5 pennies to pay for Tier 2. And so that brings you, that's your formula tax payment.
Does the state, do they guarantee more if you do have another penny, or I guess the 5 cents approved? We're doing 5 cents now, but if we did another Vader or whatever, would the state then fund more, like, on their behalf as well?
You can, and you could tax all the way up to, if the voters agreed to it, you could tax up to 17 cents. So you don't have to, you guys can determine those first 5 pennies, which you're taking advantage of. You don't have to have a voter election, but you could tax all the way up to 17 cents for Tier 2, but your voters would have to agree. Yeah.
And I just want to point out, the state is the people. The money is coming out of the same pocket, our pockets. We just sent it to them, and we pray they give us it back. So when we keep referring to the state, I want the general public to understand that's your money. That's the money that was removed from your household income and sent there. The state's not, I mean, that's your money. We keep putting it on them. We gave it to them. So we need to make sure that we are doing our best to get it back to our people.
And I was really appreciative of all the board's recommendations for putting together this slide presentation because, you know, one thing that you'd emphasized to me is to make sure it was really clear why your tax rate is the way it is, because you guys care so much about the fact that it's local. This is local property taxpayers that are having to, you know, pay this money. It's precious money for everybody involved. So, any other thoughts on tier 2? Okay.
Would you, Vader is that's the voter approved.
Voter
Just, people
approved.
may not
Yeah.
understand the term Vader, that stands for the voter approved tax rate increase.
Well, we also talked about not using acronyms, so we're trying, ladies. I think there's more jargon in education than it's like speaking a foreign language. Okay.
Real quick,
Mm-hmm.
61 million, is any of that actually going to supplemental? Or are we pretty much using that to fund the gap?
Well, I would say we're using it to fund regular programs. So what happens is we generate all of these allotments. So we don't take the bilingual allotment and say, well, let's budget the bilingual allotment. We look at it collectively as a whole. Like, this is our total revenue that we're going to generate for the year, and then we build our budget based upon that, all at the same time ensuring that we're complying with the maintenance of effort requirements. So it's hard to say exactly where the 61 million is going because it's part of the overall revenue generation and the projections that we do every year.
Okay.
And that's a great point. Were you done? That's a great point because the bilingual allotment is how much over that allotment would you say we're currently spending?
We generate about 9 million. I'd have to look and see what we're actually spending, but we are spending in
Well
excess
over.
of that, yes.
Does that include the dual language?
Yes, that's all part of that.
But even just ESL.
Mhm.
Like that's
I just have a question about the 5 cents. When did we access that?
We accessed the 5th penny, I believe, in 2019-20. After House Bill 3, or House Bill 3 allowed us to access the 5th penny without a Vader, and so we took advantage of that.
In 2019,
Mhm.
2020. Thank you.
Any other questions on tier 2? Okay. Okay, so then the final thing is your INS funding, and that is actually found on on this worksheet. 9. Yeah, so, no, yeah, okay, it starts on 9 and then rolls into 10. So, your interest and sinking fund is to pay your debt, pay your debt and your principal and your interest to build your schools, of which you have about $2 billion available. Is it all out?
No.
No, it's not all out. So, but you obviously have passed a bond and have a financing vehicle and are incurring debt to build schools right now. So we have to look at how we're going to pay for that debt. And the way that this works is Karen will very carefully calculate how much you owe in principal and interest in the next year. And she will give that data to TEA, and then they'll make sure that you're taxing at a rate that will ensure that you can pay off your debt. They don't want you to undertax because you have to make your principal and debt payments. So, in order to make your principal and debt payments for next year as part of this budget, you'll see on that line, that second line, the tax rate is 0.2825. So it's 28 cents essentially is to pay for that. So in looking at your INS funding, you're getting $26 million from the state. But again, this is very restricted because this just goes to you in order to help provide property tax relief and homestead exemptions. So this isn't like free money you can use. It's just to make sure that you're able to fully provide your citizens with their homestead exemptions. And the state agreed to subsidize those homestead exemptions when they required them. So that's that subsidy for those. And then your local share is really what you guys are raising, and that is $161 million. And again, we're just taking your $57 billion worth of property value. It's really tremendous, divided by 100 and times your tax rate. And so you're taking those 28 cents for every $100 of property tax valuation. So you guys will raise 161, so then the total amount of INS funding is 187 million. Any questions about that formula? Okay. The third one goes a little bit quicker.
And
Okay.
I do want to point out that changed in 2019 after House Bill 3.
The 5-cent tax, or are you referring to the INS, something about the INS?
Yeah, something about the INS was affected. Well, not necessarily. The M&O rate was, the compression came in. So
Yes.
they compressed our M&O. It really didn't impact INS, but that's why you see a dramatic drop in
Yeah.
overall tax rate.
Yeah, that's why you saw a drop in the local tax rate starting after 2019. Okay, so the final thing is to just kind of put it all together and talk about what your tax rate is. So for this coming year, because one of your biggest responsibilities, and I know you guys take it very seriously, is how much you're going to, tax your property tax citizens and how that tax rate is developed. So again, if you'll recall, for Tier 2, you're accessing those 5 pennies, and so that's 5 pennies of your rate. For Tier 1, TEA has set a rate of that 6171, so that's to pay for Tier 2. And, on both Tier 1 and Tier 2, the state's paying for some, and you guys are paying for some.
And that was decreased, right, recently?
Yes,
It was
this is not the adopted tax rate, this is the proposed tax rate for next year, so just to be clear.
Yeah.
We haven't, approved
No,
it
yeah,
yet.
you guys, this is not your adopted rate. This is just how it's developed and what's included in your draft budget right now.
But I'm saying the MCR rate did go down this year.
It did,
Okay.
yes.
So the state is wanting to give relief to taxpayers, correct? Okay, just making sure I understand that.
When you say that, be more specific through tax
Through the
relief.
MCR, they reduced that mandated rate. What was it before? Right now it's 0.6171. What was it?
They reduced it by 0.0025 cents, so a quarter of a penny,
Across the board?
just on the Tier 1 portion.
Okay.
And so we're wanting to move that over to the INS.
That is correct. And we'll get into that discussion
Yeah.
in my presentation.
So then the current tax rate that is included in Karen's presentation, so your current board, and that you guys will be putting out, and you have a lot of notifications you have to make about it, would be 0.9496. And that's how it is being determined. Any questions about that? Okay.
Just to be clear, that means only 0.05% of it we have made the decision on.
Yeah.
That's it.
The board has only made it, and that was a good thing to point out, is that you guys have, everything else is determined. You just
It's
have
told to us.
discretion over, those 5 pennies.
Unless we were to
Unless
go
you go
out.
to your voters. Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. So then the final thing is the truth in taxation. And this came up last year because President Odenweiler was, a little concerned because the board you guys haven't made any changes or done anything to increase your taxes. TEA is giving you your tax rate, your big MCR tax rate. So you guys aren't doing anything, or your property values are shifting. It's not something where you're going out and trying to increase your taxes. But the current state law says that if your tax rate increases for any reason, it doesn't matter if it's TEA saying it doesn't matter if it's because your property values changed, you have to read statements that say you're making a tax increase. And so next, or on the 18th, the board chair will be required to read that you guys are increasing taxes. And that's the statement. You can go read the fuller statement. It's actually quite a long statement. But one thing that you have to say out loud is that you're raising taxes. And then you also are going to have to put, notifications in the newspaper that says that you're raising taxes. So those are like required warnings. And it's just very confusing to the public because you guys have done nothing and are not trying to raise taxes, but you're being required by Texas law to say that you are. And you also all have to vote for the, we need 60% of you at least to vote for your tax rate. That's also required by Texas law. So sometimes there's also starting to be hesitancy because you're elected officials and you care about your citizens, and if you're not raising taxes, but you're having to vote for a tax increase, sometimes it feels a little, just you want to be really careful with it, and you want to make sure your taxpayers understand that you're not actually increasing their taxes.
Are you saying this is if MCAD raises property values, but our tax rate remains the same? Is that what you're saying?
So this language is based on the no new revenue rate that we are required to calculate each year. Tammy McRae, our tax assessor, does that for us. And so if we are adopting a tax rate that exceeds the no new revenue rate, we are required to say this language when we adopt our tax rate. And it's saying we're effectively raising our taxes based on what the no new revenue rate calculation came in.
But
And
we
what
haven't
is
done
that?
that.
So this year, our no new revenue rate is 0.9232. And we're proposing to adopt 0.9496. So it exceeds the no new revenue rate based on the calculation prescribed by the Comptroller's office. And so we are required to say the language when we adopt our tax rate.
When was the last time we did that?
Last year.
Last year, every year.
We adopted above the no new revenue rate.
We did.
And the problem is, like I said, is that the public can become confused that you guys are, because you have to put all over in the newspaper that you're increasing their taxes when that's not.
Why would we
Yeah.
do that when we were anticipating an increase of 6% or 8% in property value?
Because we have to adopt the tax rate that the state calculates for us, which is that MCR. Regardless of what the no new revenue rate calculates at, we are required to adopt the rate the state. Now, when I say that, we're not required to, but we could adopt the no new revenue rate, but the state would penalize us because when they calculate our state funding, they're going to calculate the local share based on the MCR that they calculated for us.
Okay.
So if we adopt a rate that's lower than that and collect less than that, there's going to be a funding gap. So this year, if we were to adopt the no new revenue rate, we would lose about $32 million in funding because we're penalized both from the state and from the local side in adopting that no new revenue
Thank you
rate.
for clarifying.
In Lubbock, that happened to us. We had to, we were variant between, Lubbock County Appraisal District and the state. And when that variance, the state wins. And so in that process, then you can get into conflict, and it's a pretty severe situation. It's always really crazy to me when we talk about everybody wants to do away with property taxes. Love it if you could do it. But at the end of the day, the state formulas only reward you for maximizing your tax rate.
Well, they make it impossible to,
Amen.
is what you're
Impossible is a
saying.
better word.
And when you have to depend on the Montgomery County Appraisal District, because we experienced that in 22 and 24, well, in the past, it's really hard to hit this target because it's always moving. So when it comes to our property values and, 30 million here, 18 million here, where are we off? And we roll it into a new fiscal year.
Absolutely.
It's really hard to hit these targets.
And the dynamic growth of this county, it just makes it even more difficult to determine, property values, yeah.
But
So-
growth has, to our benefit, growth has become stagnant, so that's a benefit this year, so.
It depends on which way you look at it. I just want to, again, reiterate that the tax rate we're given, what we have to tax at by TEA, we're given our property value by Montgomery County's appraisal, which also is then in turn dictated by the state as well, because if we don't appraise at what they're thinking we should be appraising our properties at, we get penalized as a county that then penalizes us as a district.
But we can appeal it.
Well, you can't, but because they've already done that once, if we have another problem with it, then we're going to be in serious trouble again. Because that was brought to our attention 2 years ago.
23.
I think it was 3 years ago. that
3 years
We
ago.
were assigned state values, and we appealed, and we
But I'm
won.
just trying to say that the seven of us who take this very seriously and have been asking all these questions, not just now, but previously, we aren't in control.
Can
And-
I just add though, because we do have some control. That quarter of a penny that the state is compressed, we could actually keep that and lower our tax rate, but instead we're moving it to the INS, so we do have control over that.
But our INS only requires that because we overestimated our property value
Well,
growth.
yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah, that's down the road. But I'm just stating that these are the things they've given us is what I was getting at. We don't set the property value. We don't set that TEA tax rate is all I was trying to get to. The one thing that we did do in 2019, you said, was that it?
When
they
we
did
accessed the fifth one,
The
yes.
fifth penny,
Well,
okay.
that was legislated.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm just saying that is what we did do. All right, well, not us, but previous boards. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Well, that really concludes, I think, my part of the presentation. Karen's going to take over. Of course, I'll be supplementing as necessary, but I did end this with on page 11. I wanted to ensure that you guys had just one simple table that told you, how much state aid is coming to you and where that state aid is how much is coming for tier 1, how much is coming for tier 2, and then how much you're utilizing local property taxes. But when you add everything together, your maintenance and operations and your interest and sinking, your overall budget is $902 million, and that's on the bottom of page 11. And I just bring that up because, you guys are fiscal stewards over almost $1 billion and 71,000 students. So it's you have a big job, and I applaud the efforts that go on here. This is just kind of a simple way to try to look at that data. So with that, are we good to? Do you guys have any more questions about just in general? So yay, we figured out how you get your entitlement from the state and from your taxpayers.
Thank you, Kara, that's excellent.
I'm going to
Karen,
invite
thank
Mr.
you.
Roebuck to come up, so if you want to say that. Thank you. I'll do some introductions here while Mr. Stewart's getting the presentation up. I'm sorry?
No, I was just going to say, for
are we doing-
for the public, originally, we were asked by some trustees to move all budget conversation together.
Okay.
And we were going to go to citizen participation in between
Okay.
these two presentations. We have one citizen participant, and I don't foresee that they're going to leave. So I would like to ask that citizen, do you mind, Ms. Bates, if... Okay, so thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we were cognizant of that, and we'll be happy to come back to you if you're okay with that.
Trustee Odenweiler, you have two.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yep, no problem. Just wanted to make sure on it. So we are good to go. What
Okay.
were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Okay,
Oh, wait,
I
what
was-
was
We
your
have
question?
one more.
It was, yes, we're just moving all budget conversation first together, both pieces, and then we're going to go back to consent agenda since we won't be having citizen well, do I have to read that legally? Oh, we have one more? Oh, I am so sorry. There's another citizen participation. Who?
Robin Day Ferrara.
Oh, Ms. DeFerrari? Do you want us to go in between with citizen participation right now? Are you okay if we continue with our board discussion with the budget and then come back to you then? Thank you very much. I just think it's very good to keep it cohesive. So thank you, and we'll come back to citizen participation and then do consent agenda. Thank you, sorry.
All right, well, I wanted to introduce Mr. John Roebuck. He is the district's financial advisor and has been with us for many years and been through many bond programs with us. And he is going to be vital to our discussion regarding the debt service tax rate and has lots of information to share with you about that. And we're open, to questions and comments about that. All right, well, good evening, President Odenweiler, members of the board, and Dr. Vincent. It is my pleasure to be here this evening to provide you with a preliminary budget update for 26-27. We are excited to be here this evening. This is an exciting time of year for us as we are preparing for the return of students. Our buildings are starting to come alive again. Teachers came back to work today, and we will welcome students back next Wednesday. I wanted to thank Dr. Vincent and his leadership, our executive leadership team, our finance staff, our department leaders, our campus principals for their contribution to this budget. It takes a lot of collaboration from many stakeholders across the district to get to the place where we are this evening. So I want to just thank all of them for their help with this budget. And then we are pleased to be bringing you a balanced budget this evening. We knew that that was a priority for you as a board and for our community, that we deliver a balanced budget. And so we have made that commitment from the very beginning of this process to ensure that we bring you a balanced budget. Did we have to make some hard decisions along the way? Yes, we did. But we are proud to be bringing you a balanced budget this evening. So this is our timeline. We began this process back in January as we started looking at our initial projections for the upcoming school year, and you can see all of the milestones. We are nearing the end of this journey. On August 18th, we will hold our public hearing on the budget and then bring the budget and the tax rate to you for final adoption. So how is our budget developed? I'm going to do a little bit of training that's going to kind of build on what Ms. Ballou shared with you to go into the tax rate a little bit deeper and some of the funding elements. So how our budget is developed, one of the first things that we start looking at in early spring, in January, February, is our revenue projections for the upcoming school year. So how much revenue will we generate for our maintenance and operations fund and our debt service fund to support the expenditures for the next school year? And then how much money do we have in our savings account? We refer to that as our fund balance. And then are there any legislative changes that we need to consider when looking at our revenue projections? And then on the expenditure side, what is our projected enrollment? This is the data element that drives the vast majority of our expenditures as a district. As we work through our campus allocations, projecting enrollment at the campus level down to bilingual education, general education, we're applying those staffing formulas in detail every year to ensure that we are providing equity across all campuses in terms of staffing. We were very intentional this year about implementing those staffing formulas with diligence to ensure that we were spending our dollars wisely and only adding the absolute necessary positions that we needed. And then we look at support departments. Do we need to hire additional bus drivers or custodians? If we're opening new buildings, we have to provide custodians and support staff for those buildings. And then other expenditure needs, insurance, fuel, utilities, supplies. And then are there legislative changes that will impact the expenditure side of the budget? So when we look at our revenue, as Ms. Ballou said, there's two major sources of revenue that we have. That is our local property tax collections and then our state funding known as the Foundation School Program. Those two elements make up the vast majority of our revenue. We do have a small portion of local revenue that's primarily interest income, game revenue. It's a very small portion of our budget, but these are the vast majority of our revenue budget comes from these two sources. I think there's an important distinction we need to explain. The state of Texas is somewhat unique in that we fund Texas schools in the state of Texas based on what's known as average daily attendance. And so that is simply days in attendance divided by the number of days that we have on our instructional calendar. So if a student is in attendance all 174 days of the year, we receive one ADA for that student, which is worth $6,215. Our current district percentage is about 93%, so every 1% in ADA funding is worth $5 million to the district. Whereas enrollment is the actual number of students, our expenditure budget is based on enrollment, so we have to staff our classrooms based on the number of students that enroll, not the number of students that are expected to come to school every day. And so it's an important distinction that our revenue budget is based on average daily attendance, whereas our expenditure budget is based on enrollment data. So that 7% gap in funding is about $35 million to the district. We are one of, I believe, less than 5 states across the nation that fund Texas public schools this way. This was a topic that I think the legislature considered a couple of sessions ago, but it's very expensive to fix this. If they were to move to an enrollment-based funding model, there's no way that they could afford it. I think it got a little bit of traction, but not enough, obviously, to make it over the goal line. So I just wanted to kind of explain that important difference.
Can we go back?
Yes.
For just a moment. So, we talk about how are we going to increase revenue all of the time, right? We tend to focus on taxes, on enrollment, those sorts of things. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about attendance. And I know in the past we've had 94% attendance, 95%. I mean, 95% that's $10 million right there. So, and I've emailed you guys. I would like to have an agenda item. I'll fill that out as well. But I would like us to really do a deep dive on what are we doing and what can we do to strengthen this, because this is a huge source of revenue.
To go along with what you're saying, there was a news story that came out the other day about a district that was able to increase by several percentage points, and I sent it to Dr. Benson. And it has, I spoke with the board president, and an idea would be what they're doing is they're giving a percentage of that revenue to the school. So it motivates the school to make sure that the kids are there. They're giving a percentage of the revenue earned back directly to that school. So I think there are a lot of things that we could look into to increase that.
I just know we've done it in the past, and I know that I hear COVID, COVID was 6 years ago. So I'd like to figure out how we can beef that up.
Right,
So,
and
anyway.
there's a lot of great things going on at the campuses in terms of incentivizing attendance, and we can certainly bring that forth to you and share that information.
Remind me though, Ms. Garza, the number we turn in to the TEA regarding our ADA, is that estimated or is that actual?
It's actual.
That is
so
actual?
Summer PEAM's submission includes the actual attendance for the prior school year that we just
is that done
finished.
twice a year? Do we
No,
submit?
once in the summer. Well, we're reporting it every 6 weeks now as the school year. That's a new requirement this year, but the final PEAMS data is reported in the summer each year with all of the attendance data for the school year that we just finished.
So but in order to build this budget for next year projection, we use the previous year's?
Well, we're using kind of an average of where we've been the last 3 years. So 93 has been where we have prior to, and I know I said the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, we were at 94.2, 94 and a half.
So we're
So,
still using-
and we did drop down to the 92% range. So we've come back a little bit, but
I remember that
not-
very well. That goes back to the
Yes.
conversation I'm referencing in my mind right now,
Yes.
is that this is an estimated, that we
Correct.
we take 3 years and estimate and then go off of that. Basically, we self-correct every forward-moving
Yes.
year.
Yes.
So-
I mean, the entire budget is essentially an estimate, right? Because
Right.
we're projecting based on a lot of assumptions.
So is it, just to Trustee Dawson's point, is it safe to say this is an area where we could, not fudge, that's not the right word, but we could estimate higher?
Well, there's a danger in that, right? Because if you
Correct.
estimate too high, I mean,
I'm just going along to
Mhm.
her point she was making is that this is an area where it has been adjusted in the past.
Yes.
So.
Just on that note, a funny caveat is one of our local districts, that is their priority, one of their 3 priorities this year.
Well, the
Is
ADA
that-
funding,
to move to enrollment-based?
Meaning for their district, everything is focused on
Oh.
3 different things, and one of
Okay.
them is making sure that you have things on that last day before a holiday or that whatever to encourage everyone to be there on those odd days you don't want to lose attendance.
and I made it as a legislative priority. I don't think it made the cut. You guys don't think that this is something the state would ever consider again? Because now that we're giving, educational saving account directly to those schools, it would only seem fair to give it to public schools as well.
I just know the last time it came up, they said they couldn't afford it at the time, which I
They say that about
don't
everything.
realize that would have changed,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah.
I'll just add really quickly that the other reason the state has been very hesitant to move to just paying for enrollment is because they want districts to be strongly incentivized to make sure kids are in school.
Why don't they do that for the other schools would be my question. And
Yeah.
I feel like there is a fight there, considering now that we are giving it to other schools in a different way that wasn't done before.
And that's one of the reasons why when I submitted one of the priorities, we haven't decided that as a district yet, but one of my submitted priority requests was that we consider doing an enrollment base, like a flat basic allotment, and then give a bonus to districts for percentages of attendance to encourage them to keep working towards it. And I'm not going to speak to what those numbers are or anything at this time, but I think that we could go from an enrollment and then incentivize, as to what she was saying, districts to get those bonus percentages or dollars for the attendance.
or just make it completely fair as we're doing the other schools.
Right.
Well, that would be ideal, but if you've worked with them and you've heard and you know that they're just shutting anything with basic allotment increases down, they're shutting down, getting rid of ADA, they're shutting down all of those things. Sometimes legislatively, you have to try to work with them to figure out what would be appealing to them. And that's, you can't just say, because you did this for this, we want this. That doesn't necessarily get you where you're going.
Just locally, because I do think, as we work through this, how can we generate more revenue, right? I've had a lot of conversation with you this week and Dr. Vincent about compensation. It keeps me up at night. And, we need to generate more revenue to be able to work on our compensation, right? And so this is a place that it feels like if we could linger just for a second more, like how can we not move this? Can we not make this a priority as our district and get strategic on our attendance and set goals for it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can set goals and, work through the whole process of doing what we're going to be doing. You brought up one idea from Katie, and there are others that are there, that COVID mindset that schools now become optional, that they'll pull the kid out for a week and that they're going to and see what's going to happen. And so we've got to change that mindset directly. And that can be something that we can focus our attention towards, and of course, yeah.
You've done this a long time though, but so please be honest with me. If this is not something that we can move the needle on, just be honest about it.
Well, the thing is that, it's a hard question to answer. I know this, that in my previous district, I was running about 96% attendance. After COVID, I ran back at 93, and we got almost back up to 95. Now, it still wasn't up to the peak of where it was, but there are some manageable difference as far as that stuff goes. And that coupled with the notion of, you're trying to incentivize. The one thing that you can do is make sure kids are engaged. That's one of the things that we did is do a sports audit, a fine arts audit. We're doing all those things about engagement. Getting kids the opportunity to want to come to school because it matters. Because they come to school for soccer, not English. I'm sorry, but that is the truth. And they all said amen. But that's the whole thing, is that finding a way to make that happen and making the school a place that they want to be and they feel engaged is a big part of that. So, yeah, absolutely.
I think also you mentioned engaging judges, right? Make sure they're enforcing truth.
Yeah, absolutely. We have got one that shall be named, but we're working on with them specifically to say we need you to enforce the truancy laws. Because especially at the high school, because you can third graders, you can put them in the car and make them go. When you get to the high school, they got options. So and so that's what really happens, and so that's where we're at and what we need to do.
But maybe in the next few months, we'll give you guys time to kind of realize.
Actually, we're already working on it.
Oh,
We've got some stuff, and we're going to work on that.
So next month, then? No. I'm just
Oh yes.
I'm just
Okay.
kidding. You said you're already working. Okay, sorry. I hate to
No, you're good.
stall us on that.
All right, so revenue projections, the basic allotment, we've discussed that a little bit. This is the primary mechanism that the state uses to fund Texas public schools. This includes our regular program allotment. All of our weighted allotments are that weight is based on the basic allotment. You can see the 11-year history of where the basic allotment has been. The last time we've received a sizable increase was back in 2019 when House Bill 3 was passed, when it went from 5140 to 6160. We did receive a small incremental increase last year of $55 when it went to $6,215, and that's where we sit today. So I like to explain Texas school finance by using the glass illustration. I know some of you have seen this before. I'm going to build kind of upon what Kara had referred to earlier with the Tier 1 portion and who's funding each of the components of that. So let's pretend that the glass represents our combined state and local revenue, and the state calculates an entitlement, as Ms. Ballou referred to, for every school district across the state, and that state calculated entitlement determines how big your glass is. So how do you increase the size of your glass? You can increase the basic allotment. An increase in the basic allotment would obviously increase the size of the glass, because that's that basic mechanism to fund schools. That requires legislative action. If we enroll more students, we're reporting more ADA, so that would increase the size of our glass, but that also requires more teachers and support staff. If we were to adopt additional Tier 2 pennies, that would give us a guaranteed yield on any of those additional pennies. That would increase that Tier 2 portion. And then an increase in our average daily attendance, as we discussed, would also increase the size of our class. So before we start looking at the components of that, we're going to concentrate on the M&O portion of our tax rate, which is 0.6696 currently. This is where we are history-wise with our tax rate. Back in 21-22, we were at 0.9160. You can see where we've come down on the M&O portion. And the blue portion in the 26-27 column, the 6171 is what we referred to earlier in our training, and then the 0.05 is those enrichment pennies. So our maintenance and operations tax rate proposed for next year is 0.6671. So if you look at the interaction between our tax rate and state funding, what the state does is they calculate that Tier 1 entitlement. It's based on our ADA, our special programs. I have other programs lumped in here as well. And then they calculate that Tier 2 entitlement. That's our weighted average daily attendance times that guaranteed yield of $129.52 times the number of Tier 2 pennies that we have. So those two components together determine what our overall state calculated entitlement is. So then we have our Tier 1 component of our tax rate at 0.6171, and then our Tier 2 component of our tax rate at 0.05. So that Tier 1 component of the entitlement and the tax rate interact with one another, as well as the Tier 2 component. So what happens is the state says, okay, Conroe, you levy your tax rate of 0.6671, you fill the glass, and then we will put in the rest of the money. Okay? So if we look at this and put actual dollars to it, for next year we are calculating or projecting our Tier 1 entitlement to be $653.5 million, our Tier 2 to be at 61.6. So our overall entitlement, including other programs, is $715.1 million. That Tier 1 portion of our tax rate at 0.6171, based on our certified values, will generate $350 million locally, and that Tier 2 component will generate 28.4. So we're going to fill the glass with our $379 million that we collect locally, and then the state is going to kick in the rest to get us to that total state calculated entitlement. So if we put this all together, looking at our proposed budget for next year, we're going to fill the glass with our $379 million that we collect locally from our M&O tax rate, and then the state is going to kick in the remaining 336. We have TRS in kind that you see on all of our budget presentations. That's a pass-through entry that we're required to make every year. It has no impact on the bottom line. And then our other local revenue that I referred to earlier with our interest revenue, our game revenue, is a very small portion of our budget to get us to our total revenue projected budget of $769.6 million. So I will pause there and see if you have any questions about it. So it's basically what Ms. Ballou referred to, but just in a more visual format.
So the local the interest that we talked about, the
Yes.
10 million,
Mhm.
that's part of the budget.
That's
what you're telling me.
built into the budget, yes.
That's built in the budget. It is spent
That is correct.
on.
That's part of the
educating
overall
students.
revenue, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure we.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense? Does that help to explain? Okay. All right, so now we'll move into our 26-27 budget considerations. One of the things that we obviously were looking at is our slowed enrollment growth. We are opening 3 new campuses this year. Arnold and Fowler will welcome students next Wednesday, and then Grand Oaks 9 will open after the Christmas break. House Bill 2 that was passed during the last legislative session has essentially shifted the timing and eligibility of raises to the state, and then our growing special education population is an item that we are always taking into consideration, and then the unknown impact of education savings accounts.
Can I ask about, is it really unknown? Do we know? Is that public?
No.
What we have lost?
It really isn't. I mean, there's no tracking mechanism as it's by the state standards as far as it goes. Now, there's situations where people apply and do different things as far as that stuff goes. And you know, we've assessed, how many students have we assessed? I think with special education for
12,000, little over 12,000.
Yeah.
Is where we ended the year.
Well, but I'm talking about that.
Oh,
we've assessed
for
'cause
that
we get $1,000. It costs about $3,000, but it's about $1,000 to assess them students, and then we've got
2,500
Yeah.
is what we did this year.
And
Yeah.
these are new students to Conroe ISD?
These are students that we performed a a full initial evaluation on this past school year, around 2,500.
And they're new to Conroe ISD.
They're not necessarily new,
necessarily.
they're just students that have asked to be
Right, I mean,
tested
The
first.
students get a new evaluation every 3 years if needed or requested, and/or the new students that come, or if there's other needs that have identified.
Yeah,
And we also evaluate students that are not enrolled in
yeah, that's the,
That is correct.
but I mean, the thing is, people ask about that, there's no real way to understand. It's really going to be, it's going to be a new day when it all happens, you know what I mean? So we don't know, we've considered that, thank you for allowing us to get a demographer, because that's really going to help us in the process of looking at where we are and what we're doing. And so then they're making those calculations, and we're trying to work through that.
I was just going to mention on the education savings account, while you might not know the number of kids that are intending to take advantage of the program, every child that leaves is at least the loss of the basic allotment. So it would be at least, for many of the children, it would be much more than that, but at very least, any child that takes advantage of that is no longer in your school, so they're not generating the basic allotment, that $6,215. But usually it would be quite a bit more than that.
But we calculate with enrollment projections that we've lost about 500 kids.
We
Or-
reduced our projected enrollment from 73.5, which is what we used last year during the budget planning process, to 72.8. So we did decrease it by 700 students, because we overshot the number last year, because at Snapshot, we were at 72,757.
This is a conservative estimate, and I think that's what we've tried to do for you guys, is to make everything we do, meter it down, and then, plan for the worst, and, and hope for the best.
I think that's very wise.
Yep.
But what you're saying is, in the previous year, we weren't conservative enough
No.
because we were 500 over.
Well, yes, we thought we were conservative. I mean, there was
Yeah.
no predicting what did happen last year and what's happening going forward.
Well, we
This
know
is
now.
something we have not seen, yes.
But I would venture to say, just looking at those numbers, that ESAs have not really substantially impacted Conroe ISD.
We have
Not
no
yet.
idea till we
Yeah,
get
we-
done.
Not
get
for
started.
this year. I don't
We
think.
won't know
Yeah.
for 3 years.
Yeah, and we're going to keep, that's the thing, that it's a great question, because what we're going to do is really be cognizant of that. We're looking at enrollment every day, as far as where it goes in and where we're coming out. So then what happens is that you're going to have people who no-show. And then in the first couple of weeks, we'll provide you some data points that will tell you where we're at, so that we'll know. You'll get tired of the spreadsheets. No, y'all won't. No, but that's a beginning.
Can we talk about the HB2 funding model for raises for just a second?
Before we start on that, I wanted to ask the question about the testing expense, and that, if you don't mind. Dr. Wiggins, when we were in the meeting the other day with legislators, that number, you just used the number 2,500, is that correct? What did you say it is now for the full testing on our students? And we're not doing flybys, we're doing full testing. So can you tell me what that new number is, please? Because I think it was more than 2,500.
We calculated, there were 3 staff members involved, correct?
Oh, okay, so
That are
basically,
part of the,
Was it updated
It's-
from the other day then?
well, it's north of 3,000.
Okay,
What
that's
we're
what I was
actually
getting at.
spending, we're receiving 1,000 per full initial evaluation from the state, but we're spending north of 3,000.
Yeah, it depends, because some of them will go into more detail, so it depends on how detailed the testing and based on what they're looking at, because I think of also comparing it to like an independent evaluation, and those usually range from about 2,500 to about 4,500, so somewhere around 2,500.
And thank you, because she wasn't in the room when we were discussing that, and she came back in, so that's why I wanted to capture it before we went on to the other
Can
topic.
I, just to follow up to that, so that's the initial evaluation, but what about like when there's like the IEEs, that potential additional testing that is requested if they don't agree? How is that amount factored in the budget?
It's part of what we're spending on special education.
Okay.
It's part of the gap.
It's just a gap.
So
Okay.
who developed this $1,000 number?
The state.
The state.
This was a new allotment they put into
That was
House Bill
intended to
2
cover
in-
testing,
to cover testing.
and they just missed the mark?
I don't know.
I mean, it's
They- no one
terribly
consulted
nothing.
me.
We weren't getting any before, but it's still definitely not adequate.
Well, they didn't take into account the right considerations because they missed the dollar amount terribly.
Well, I think, I think that there was a lot of people that wanted the money last session, like they do every session, and so there's only X amount of money, so
And
There-
when
we
a
have a
lot
water
of our,
problem. Who knew
our
that
budget
water
is
was gonna
based
take so
off
much?
of a
lot
growing
of
special
money.
ed population. Like, would you say the majority of those that are getting tested, like, stay in the district, or they come to the district, or are we getting a lot of testing where, you know, they're going elsewhere, but we are required to give it?
I mean, most of the students we test stay in the district, but obviously with TEFA and stuff, we're having a lot more of our students that are being tested for private school. So this summer alone, probably we've doubled in requests to prepare for the application for next year. They've gone ahead and asked for testing, and they are not in our district or
So
don't plan to attend.
In one of the other models, we're budgeting those as our actual special education growth, though, right? Or are you taking those students out?
Those students are not in our growth. They're in our initial evaluation numbers when we count those numbers. So they would get the $1,000
Right.
for that piece of testing if it's an initial, but they are not in our numbers as far as our special education. They don't
So
go
you
in
didn't
because
even put them in.
They're
in
not
the numbers. So
enrolled.
what we're looking at is only the ones that stayed.
Correct. Enrolled.
But I did hear this correctly. If they are in the special education category, we don't receive, and they stay, we don't receive the basic allotment for that student. That's
half it's
50%?
Right.
reduced.
Mhm.
And then the other is suggested to be made up in allotments that are
the
special
weighted
education.
funding,
But
yes.
that is typically the case, or is typically not the case, that we make up the other 50%?
No, we always lose the 50% because that comes straight off of the regular program allotment.
And was that known at the time that things were implemented, or was that unknown?
That's just part of law.
It is, yeah, it's known. It's known.
I
and
feel
it's-
like we educated a lot of people in
Yeah.
Capitol last session.
But
They
was
were
it
like, that's
known-
not happening. We're like, it's happening.
Was it known by the legislators when they wrote this
Well, when the
legislation?
person that wrote it, yeah, way back in the day, that was a long time ago.
I think that what we're looking at, that's one of the things objectively and legislatively that we're going to do, is we're going to make a very clear picture about what we're getting funded for this, and we're going to tell, it was just like when I was working on House Bill 6 last session, that many of these stories were new, and so, collectively, and you guys know a whole lot about special education, that, at the end of the day, we'll be able to teach them about what's going on. We're going to do it with stories and be specific.
But we're going to assume that it was unknown when they legislated.
I always assume that people, it's unknown.
Okay.
Because, I think a lot of people, they're having to pass a lot of stuff, and so if we have short, very concise stuff.
Well, it's the main contributor to our deficit right now, or to a potential deficit moving forward. So I want to make sure that we understand that this wasn't necessarily known, or considered, but it's something that can be addressed.
Yeah.
And
And
when special
repaired.
education funding, when they created that formula, special education looked a lot different. So most students at that time were not served in general education. So as the trends have changed, the funding, that tier, that hasn't changed anything. So the new tier is supposed to factor that in, but it's not that it wasn't unknown, it's just the budget, they've never changed how they weighted funding for special education, and special education has changed over the last 50
3 years.
20,
How many?
it's been a long time, so I think the initial budget, what was it, in the 70s that they
Yeah,
did the
it's been a
initial
long-
funding, and so now we're 26. So I think that, I don't know that they've adjusted it on how they weighted the funding since the 70s.
Wow.
We good?
Okay, you have a question, HB2.
HB2 funding model for raises has essentially shifted timing and eligibility of raises to the state. I said, compensation keeps me up at night, and it is a problem for us, and we are off the mark, and we're always off the mark. And so even when HB2 funding comes and we're able to give what everybody else gives, we're still off the mark. Can you explain how it shifted the timing, and how did neighboring districts, how were they able to give something else this year and
Okay.
we were not?
I have a slide for that in a little bit
Oh,
later
okay,
if we
sorry.
can wait.
Okay, I'm getting
Yes,
ahead of
okay.
myself,
No,
sorry.
you're fine. You're
I'm
fine.
Thank you, that's very positive of you, thank you.
All right, so these are some of the budget concerns that we had coming into this budget season and moving forward. Of course, our stagnant enrollment growth, our inability to provide raises for employees, our compensation and plan in general needs some work to stay competitive, number one, and then stipend increases, as was in the audits that we had on fine arts and athletics. We've not looked at those stipends for UIL activities for over a decade on some of them.
12 years.
And it's one of those things where we know it's out there, and we do the budget, and we do what we can, and then we get to the end, and there's nothing left to do that. And so that has to be a priority. We know competitive pay, we're falling behind in certain categories, and that has to be a focus as well, but it all takes money. Fast growth allotment, we talked about earlier, about our potential drop into Tier 2. And then our fund balance in the general fund, we've had a significant strain on our reserves over the last 2 years to support our self-funded insurance plan. Now on 9/1, we will be moving to TRS Active Care. That was a move that we felt we needed to make to be fiscally responsible. Last year, we transferred $7 million of our reserves into the self-funded plan. This year, we're looking to transfer $11 to $12 million in the plan to keep us whole for the year, and then we'll have run out claims. So it was a hard decision. I know there's some people that are not happy about it, but fiscally we needed to do it. We could not continue to support the health plan in its current design, and even if we were to adjust premiums to bring the plan back to a solvency, we would have had to increase them double than what they were. So the numbers were astounding. I absolutely believe we made the right move in moving to TRS Active Care, and I know it's been hard on a lot of employees trying to adjust to that, but there are districts around us that are doing the same thing. Like their school districts are getting out of the healthcare business because we just cannot sustain it.
Can we at least acknowledge that a lot of the costs driven up in the past 3 years that we've seen are related to cancer and things that we've yet to understand because of COVID potentially?
Yes.
So
high claims are
something-
definitely, a driver of the costs of the plan.
Well,
So
one
that's
of the
a
things, Karen,
contributor.
that I want to mention is that, one of the things from a financial advisement standpoint, they're encouraging you to have at least 3 months of operating. And that's, if you look at 3 months, isn't that about $227 million? And
I have a slide on our
yeah,
fund
we're gonna put
balance.
that- No, so now I'm forecasting.
Yeah, you're fine.
Go ahead,
Ms.
ma'am.
Garza, you just mentioned the last 2 years, almost 8 million last year, 11 million, 12 million this year. Were you able to double check what I
I
was asking?
confirm we did not transfer.
We didn't the
No,
year before.
we transferred in 24-25. We're getting ready to do a transfer this fall
25,
for
26.
25-26, and then depending on how run-out claims look next year. We did
So-
not transfer in 23-24. I did confirm that today.
So that's approximately 12 plus approximately $8 million over the last 2 years.
Yes.
That's
significant.
Significantly staggering, which in reality and I told you this, people don't really, their concern isn't that number because they can't relate to that number. They relate to what's in their bank account.
Right.
And in reality, it would still affect them worse if we
Had
weren't
stayed.
proactive on it.
Yes.
Because we wouldn't be able, we'd have to cut staffing. We'd have to, somewhere that money would have to be made up if we were to continue. And it isn't that we're not looking at it.
Right.
It is that the only place you can cut in order to raise that kind of capital is in people. And we, A, don't want to do that to people, and B, we can't afford to do that to
Right.
people. We need every person. So I just want to acknowledge that.
I have a question about the self-funded insurance. What do you know what the projections would have been in terms of maybe a potential loss had we stayed?
It would have been well north of $12 to $13 million.
Again.
And there was the only correction that we could do was to reduce benefits, make the deductibles higher, co-pays higher, or increase premiums. And when they modeled what premiums would need to be in order to make it work with benefit changes that were, reasonable, the premiums were astronomical. Like it was not something we would want to consider. And then again, it was all a forecast, right? So we'd be opening ourselves up to that risk going forward. So we decided, in order to create some stability in our general fund operational budget, that we had to make the move, because we can do all we can to save and increase enrollment and ADA. But if at the end of every year we're having to write a $10 million check to self-funded, all that work we've done is just gone to support the self-funded insurance plan.
And so based on what you just said, had we kept it, we would have had to potentially so there is an increase because of what we're going to.
Correct.
Would the increase have been more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Had we not made
And
the change?
we did share information when we were going through this process last fall about what the modeling would look like if we were to stay self-funded and projecting claims increasing as well, because we know that would have happened as well. So we were trying to make up ground from the previous deficits that we had, plus the increase in claims going forward, to set premiums that would allow us to
It would cost our
support.
employees more than even making the
Absolutely,
change.
absolutely.
So, Ms. Garza, safe to say since we don't control the cost of health care and we don't control the cost of health insurance, at least going with TRS, does that give us more control? Obviously, I guess that's why we
Yeah,
made
we're
the
not-
choice. But are we going to be moving forward, and does that enable us to control costs better by choosing TRS?
Yes, because all we're essentially doing is collecting the premium from the employees and then passing it on to TRS.
So that's really
So
the
they're
key.
managing the plan.
But that's the key, is that because we don't control the cost of healthcare, private isn't an option anymore, because
Right.
that's just going to continue to
Correct.
increase.
We've eliminated our exposure to,
Well,
potential.
plus it gave us a known,
Mhm.
a known number.
Exactly.
How does TRS pull that off? It's incredible.
I mean, we're,
The larger
There's-
pool.
yes.
It's
a
not only
larger
just the
pool.
larger pool, but the other thing that we were experiencing, and we've talked about this before as well, is that self-funded plans didn't get any money from the state to help with the expense. TRS, there's many times the state kicks in our money, mind you.
That's a great point.
The state kicks in
Yes.
money, our tax dollars, it goes back to only those that are in the TRS fund. And so not only did we send them the money, but it went to the people that were under TRS, but we didn't get anything back here under our self-funded. So that was another reason they keep kicking funds back to TRS. So either we can choose to not participate and have an unknown and continue going in the hole, or we can switch to having a known number, something that we can try to work with financially and also participate in getting some of our tax dollars back.
Right. And there really is no number, because we're withholding the premium and sending it to TRS. So we're essentially acting as a pass-through with the premium for our employees.
Were we in the TASB pool prior to getting in the TRS pool?
We've been self-funded
Like,
since
so we
I've been
didn't-
here.
Did we look into getting into that at all?
The TASB insurance pool? No, we did not.
Yeah.
No.
Based on what you know, would there have been any incredible savings?
I guess I'm not familiar with the TASB
Yeah.
insurance pool for health insurance.
I don't know about the health
Yeah.
insurance.
I'm over here.
I'm not
Can check on
familiar.
All right.
Sir, I'm sorry, I've not met you, and I was just curious, can you tell me the scope of your work here in Conroe ISD? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. My name is John Roebuck. I've had the pleasure of serving the district as financial advisor since 2005. I really help the district with setting the debt service tax rate, issuing debt, formulating the plan for the debt. The M&O side is Karen,
Okay.
and she relies sometimes on me for the debt service side.
So did you help us plan for our bond package,
Yes,
our
ma'am.
last bond package?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did we not predict that there was, or how do we not have a predictor at all that there was going to be a potential slow enrollment growth, or our property evaluations would change? There was just no scenario built in at all for that?
We've worked in that program for over a year and a half before we took it to voters. Initial indications I'm a very conservative person. We had very conservative growth estimates, and actually we're told to increase them because the enrollment growth was so high that we needed to increase it to match the
Yeah.
enrollment. Because otherwise, we would not have been able to issue.
But
the
our
debt.
enrollment growth was not as high as it was predicted to be either, so.
Correct.
But who was telling you to push
Yeah.
it to the maximum?
The bond committees. I mean, we were very conservative with our interest rate, the growth rate, the assessed valuation, and the layering of the debt. We also, kind of a combination of things happened, obviously, with obviously the change in the exemption amounts. Those changed the year we actually got the bond election passed, and then obviously it was last year. And we have about $700 million plus debt that we're going to be issuing or have issued that's not subject to hold harmless. So we're seeing that in addition with the low growth this year. If we take into consideration what the values were based on the $40,000 exemption, we actually hit our target the first 2 years. This is the first year we did not hit it.
That goes back to those 2 years also being 2 years that are hard, again, to hit that mark of what actually was shifting because of the MCAD. Well, there were two factors. There was one where MCAD used, I believe they used local values and the state, or they used state values, and we wanted to use local. Anyway, we appealed it.
Right.
And got a correction. I think that was 25 million. Then there was an additional roughly 10 million maybe that resulted from the calculation error because of the.
Over 65.
But
It was 17 million over 2 years.
That was the error related to the instructions that were misinterpreted.
That is correct.
So there's a lot going on in those 2 years. It's really
I
hard.
think we have a whole slide on that,
Yes,
right?
we did.
Great.
Yeah. All right, so these are our budget assumptions. Moving into 26-27 enrollment, you can see ADA percentage there. Our certified property value growth this year came in at 0.58%. This is my 21st year here. I have never seen it below 1%. And so we are proposing a tax rate next year of 0.9496, which is flat. That is our current tax rate, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Our enrollment growth, you can see, we are definitely flattening. We're not alone. These are 10 largest districts in Texas, and what their enrollment change was from fiscal year 26 compared to fiscal year 25. While 157 is not what we wanted to see, our friends around the state are all experiencing the same thing and to a much higher degree. The state lost over 75,000 students, I believe, over that fiscal year, and so it's a trend across the state.
Do you think we've lost what we're going to loss and now we're good? Or do you foresee future loss? I mean,
well,
the projections were off it for the bond, so maybe they won't be.
Right. I mean, based on our demographic study, it looks like we're just going to kind of hover for 3 or 4 years is kind of what the project. I'm talking about enrollment, not property value.
Understood.
I can tell you, I work with other school districts around this area, and every school district lost enrollment. No one really can explain it. I have one client, particularly down south, that continues to lose, and they're not sure what's going to happen going forward. They're not sure where the kids are going.
So they don't have any idea?
No clue. No clue.
Well, I
They
would
thought
say
charter school maybe-
immigration is one, and then birth rates are going down. So I think we do have some indication.
Yeah.
We know.
I mean, it was discussed at the education meetings.
At the House hearing, yes.
At the House hearings.
It's a real hot topic
Without a doubt.
in those hearings. So.
Yes, we listened to those too.
All right, and then our special education student count, we ended the year last year at just over 12,000, and we are projecting conservatively to be just under 13,000 going into 26-27. Now, moving on to our tax rate, again, we have two components to our tax rate. The M&O portion is currently at 0.6696, and then our debt service rate is currently at 0.28 cents. So there's a tier 1 and a tier 2 component to our tax rate. As Ms. Ballou alluded to earlier, this information is based on our current tax rate. Our current compressed MCR is 6196. We are accessing 5 of the 8 available golden pennies. There are currently 9 copper pennies available. So every one of those gold pennies available to the district is worth about $12.5 million, and the copper pennies are worth $4.7 million. If we wanted to access any additional Tier 2 enrichment pennies, we would have to go to the voters for a voter-approved tax rate election to access those pennies. All right, so certified values over the last 4 years, you can see we're moving into the 23 bond. We were coming off of a record growth year at 20.92%. So as Mr. Roebuck alluded to, when the projections were set for the bond program, they were considered to be very conservative at the time. We were coming off of a 3-year growth average of about 11%. Leading
that
up
after COVID? Sorry for the interruption, but we're
well,
talking
it would have
21
been in the
23?
midst of it. I mean,
So those were students coming back
Yes.
after COVID.
So this
That was
is
an outlier year. I mean, 20%.
yes,
that's
it
20.
definitely was an outlier year. But even leading up to that, we were in the 8, 9, 10 range easily.
So like 2018,
year over year.
2019.
Yes.
3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20-year average is well over 8% each time. Okay.
But here's the thing, there's economic cycles, right? There's recessions. We're not always in an inflationary state. So was that not considered when you were looking at
It was.
projections for property growth?
Which is why we didn't keep it flat. We grew 2 years ago 8%, 7%, 6%. We went down. Essentially, we've grown every year. We did not assume growth past the last bond sale. Well, actually, past, I guess, 2 years after the last bond sale. We have 2%, 1%, and then we have flat growth after that.
That's what you were projecting?
Yes.
That's not what the future slide says.
No, we're saying after a certain number of years.
That slide. That's
Yeah, he's
showing
talking about years
8%,
beyond this.
7, 6.
I'm talking about years like 20, 30, 31, 32. Because again, I know projections are only as good as the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Following year, anything can happen. And so we try to be conservative as possible, and I think we were, and this is a shock. We again, 0.85%, I never dreamed that would happen here.
So what did we average as a county? You said you'd never seen it below 1%.
Yeah, like you said, we were averaging about between 8 and 10%. Now, the 20.92% was an anomaly that year, but consistently over the last 20 years, we were in the 8% range on average.
I don't see that reflected anywhere in our presentation. So, I mean, because this only goes back, this slide I'm looking at for growth only goes back to
We can
17, 18.
we can certainly provide you with that historical information. Mr. Roebuck has it.
Yeah,
He's
I've
already
not been
put
able
something
to find
together.
that.
Yeah. So the blue bar on the chart on the left represents what was used during the bond planning process, and then the green bar represents what the actual growth was realized, and this slowed growth has definitely put a strain on our debt service fund. We had projected needing 2 cents to put the bond program in place, and now we have been very proactive in terms of refundings and trying to build capacity within the debt service fund, but it is starting to catch up with us, and so we're going to have to make a move. And as Ms. Ballou alluded to earlier, we have to adopt a tax rate that supports the debt that we have issued to support our bond program. And you can see the drivers on the right there. Obviously, the homestead exemption changes were a huge driver of that tax base. Now, we did get a hold harmless for that, but what was really different about this legislative session is previous legislative sessions, when they had increased the homestead exemption, the hold harmless was attributed to the authorized debt. So if we had a $2 billion bond that was authorized by our voters prior to an exemption change, all of that debt would have been hold harmless eligible. Well, the distinction that was made this session was that it was issued debt. So at the time that law passed and the exemption increases were done, we had $700 million of our program that had not been issued yet. So that's $700 million in debt that we are not going to have that property value to levy on to support the debt. So
So
I
what
know
does
that's
that- what
super
does that mean?
confusing, but
Are we going to have to increase our tax rate more than what you're already proposing to cover that?
well,
$700
it depends
million?
on what values do next year. So we are proposing to move that quarter of a penny, that the M&O rate was compressed this year from the MCR calculation to the debt service fund to hold our overall tax rate flat. That'll help us to get a little bit into the debt service fund this year, about 1.4 million in additional revenue. But we will need to reevaluate this next year.
But that takes that 1.42 million away from our M&O, our classrooms.
Well, it would have not been there anyway, because
No, it means taxpayers have to pay more than what they would have otherwise.
Well, no, if we're being honest, 1.42 million going from M&O to,
Well,
Yes,
the reduction of .0025 on the M&O is state mandated. Like, we have no choice. We have to do that. So,
but it's because we carried that debt.
no, this has nothing to do with that. We report our values every summer after they're certified to the state, and then the state returns our MCR to us, and then that's where compression comes in. So the state's telling us what that tier 1 portion of our tax rate needs to be, and then that's considered compression. So the tax rate they returned to us this year was .0025 lower than what it was last year
What do they base that on?
on our property values, year-over-year growth in property values.
So, right, things
Yes.
that we had visibility of, but missed the mark.
Could you go back real quick? It says in there that there's $24 million in savings through refunding. Why hasn't that lowered our INS rate? Where has that money gone?
It's so basically refunding is what we brought to you guys, I guess, every year for the last several years in November, October, November, is we have bonds that are callable, and we refund them with lower interest rate bonds. And so we don't extend the debt, but we take the savings. And again, it's not savings you get day of closing. You get basically the year you're refunding those bonds. So if you have bonds refunding that go out to 2040, you have savings every year going out to 2040.
But
So
where do those savings go?
it just reduces the amount, it's called savings, but it reduces the amount of debt you owe that in any given year. It's a
So
combination of all the
theoretically,
debt.
shouldn't that affect the INS rate?
It has. I mean,
But the
we-
rate is the same. In fact, it's going up.
It's been used to, we actually planned for some of these refundings conservatively to help.
So on top
set
of the over projection, y'all were already accounting, that was in the formula, accounting for the
Not all of them,
refund.
because they're all, I mean, it's, again, if we get into the market right now when rates are higher, we could do refunding.
Well,
4%
based on
refund.
what the market was then.
Yep.
So if we projected the 2023 refunding, the 2024, we knew it was coming, we didn't put that in the model. The one we did earlier this year, we did not project in the model either, because we used those to actually offset some of this stuff that happened in 2025 for the debt we're issuing this year, 2026, and the year 2024, we basically just took the savings in future years.
You know, one of the things that I've done in the past, and talking about that, is like, you know, when you think it's just like one house payment that's going to be steady for the next 30 years, it's not. So what happens is that debt gets retired, debt gets refinanced, and those kind of things, and it does have an impact on your house payment as far as that annual process goes.
And this is a 30-year commitment.
Yeah, and the thing too is that when you relate it to that too, you know, one of the things that I was able to do a couple of years was defeasance, which means that you're taking excess tax money and then actually paying it off so you could find reduced rates. The problem is, and what we're facing right now is, and the same problem I had in Wiley when I first got there. We had about $6 million in fund balance, and we were in bad shape, and we needed about $50 million in fund balance. And so we have $121 million, and really, we need about $227 million. And what that does is impacts your capacity to go to the market and say the fiduciary responsibility of what you're able to do allows you to get a more favorable rate. And so when we work through these kind of things, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this whole process is to go look at that. And that is one of the things that we're going to do this year is really get strategic about objectives and what we do with all that, you know, take about attendance, you know, one of the goals and objectives that we have with all that. So, you know, all of this stuff is real, and it's really complex. And so these are good questions.
I did have one more question on that. Did you say that, did you say that originally when the bond was voted on, it was one thing, and then in the last legislative, they did it on what was issued?
Yes, that's in the upper right corner, that hold harmless provision, that one word from authorized to issued was a legislative
here we
change
went
that
with
we
a
could not
plan,
have
although
predicted.
I would tell you the plan was probably, we didn't project well on it in the latter years, but what we thought it was going to be got changed.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was part of this perfect storm again.
And another item to add to that, we actually accelerate some of the bonds too in the second bond sale. We were supposed to issue a little less. We increased a little more the second sale because we were moving a little faster with construction. So that was another factor that changed and it affected the tax rate. But right now, for that hold harmless, we're not getting for the bonds we issued in 2026, earlier this year. It's about $6.5–7 million in debt we're talking about. We're not getting made whole on.
Does that a quarter of a penny, does that cover this year's debt service exactly, or does it over collect?
It does not. Here is what we're projecting our debt service budget to look like for next year. We have a fund balance that we're projected to end this year at $23.3 million. Our revenue for next year is projected at $187.4, and our debt payment, and there's a small amount of fees in there, is at $193.6. So we're actually looking at a deficit or a shortfall of $6.2 million for next year. This is considering using the 0.2825 debt service tax rate. Now, we will mitigate some of that $6.2 million with a refunding that we plan to do this fall that should generate some savings. But we will see a reduction in our debt service fund balance, and that's why next year is going to be critical as well to see, because this is a correction that will get us part of the way this year, but looking long-term, we will more than likely need to make an adjustment next year again. And hopefully, if values grow and we get compressed even more on the M&O side, we can do something similar to keep the tax rate flat. But we will need to look at this, unless there's, we, for some odd reason, grow double digits next year and we can generate additional revenue and debt service where we don't have to make an adjustment to the tax rate. But this was just a recommendation that we thought is doable this year, because if we can keep the tax rate flat and use that quarter of a penny to help the debt service fund out, and then we'll reevaluate next year. That makes sense?
I wanted to make a statement on the tax rate, because, I mean, as a board, that's one of the most important things that we do. The state didn't compress the M&O tax rate, so districts could then raise the INS tax rate. That's not right. That tax relief was aimed at reducing the homeowner's total bill, because we're taxing people out of their homes. Our property values have gone up 86% over the last 10 years, 86%. But instead, the district is proposing that we take those homeowner savings and redirect them to covering debt service because of unchecked bond planning assumptions that were made in 2023. We've already talked about those unchecked assumptions. It all is predicated on growth in enrollment numbers and growth in our property values, both of which are very off at the moment. The bond planning committee in 2023 stated we'd have 84 to 90,000 students by 2027. That's off by 17,000 students. They also built the bond program off of the assumption that property values would go up 6 to 8% every single year. Again, our current property value growth numbers show 1.87% last year and 0.85% this year. Bottom line for me, I'm not comfortable asking taxpayers to take the hit for this. They need to see and feel the impact of the M&O compression in their budgets. So I would like to see ways that we can, if we actually just kept the M&O compression rate, you said the difference is about $1 million. Where could we pull that money that would not depend on increasing the tax rate?
Well, whatever we do, if we were to pull the money from somewhere else, and I don't know where that somewhere else would be, it would be a temporary fix, because we're only fixing 1 year's worth of shortfall in the debt service fund. There's debt that's issued out 25 years, so we have to look at the long-term.
But we're projecting 8% growth when we get less than 1.
We're projecting 6% this year.
I'm sorry, that was last year.
5% next
What
year.
would you say the impact is per homeowner if you're looking at like a $300,000 home? What would be the impact that we're talking about here?
Well, a 1 penny increase would be,
Well, with the
right.
It's talk about, well, I'd have to do the math, but it's get $140,000 off your value. So net of the homestead exemption, 1 penny is about $30 on a $300,000 home.
So $30. Okay, thank you.
For 1 penny.
But again, we're talking about every dollar matters, right?
Right.
I mean, we're moving to TRS, their premiums are going up. Homeowners, this impacts teachers too. We're raising taxes for teachers, and that's cutting into the raises that they're getting. So I just don't want to downplay the importance of what we're trying to do here.
On that same note, we also can't not take care of poor projections from before as well. I mean, we're not going to do them we have to consider how do we fix this going forward, because the projections miss the mark. Wherever that falls, and now our taxpayers, frankly, almost every single person in this room are going to be faced with it, and our ratings and we're projected on certain expenditures and having to process more of because of all the building and stuff that's going on, which honestly, I mean, that's the bad thing. Those buildings are still needed because we're over capacity. We were just talking about Bartlett the other day, is a brand-new school and has how many portables on
I think
it?
we have 14, and we're going to have 2 more to, now.
It's insane, a brand-new school with 14 portables.
Well,
And-
that's again a projection that missed the mark.
And so my point is while I 100% agree with you in the intent, we're also,
I think we
funding
can-
wise,
I think
we're
we can get creative. It's $1
going to
million.
have to figure something out for long-term as well.
Well, and I
I
don't
mean-
think this is a long-term solution that we solve in this room. I think that's a legislative priority, and
I'm
that,
saying that
All
we're
I
going
know
to
is
have
the
to address
voters,
it.
They were sold this bond with a 2-cent increase. It was stated over and over. It's just going to be 2 cents. And now we're raising it. And now you're saying with the 700 million, we might have to raise it again.
because the state
That's
tells
not-
us to.
That's not, our constituents are not going to appreciate that.
No, I want to point out, because you did say the state requires us to. If we don't do this, we're going to be,
No,
Well-
that's for the no new revenue rate.
That's for the operations side. The debt service side, you have control over what you want to set the tax rate at. With understanding that if you default in your debt, then it's an issue. But again, we've got to find a solution.
And I don't know if
make it
it's
short.
taxing people more. That's my personal.
Mr. Roebuck?
That's my personal feeling.
We're going to have to get real creative
Yeah,
here.
there's no other revenue stream, and unless we start doing junk bonds for their interest or our fund balance, but I can't do that either.
Well, we're refunding
We are
bonds
refunding.
and getting,
We're actually, the one we're going to propose to you in October is probably going to be more considered restructuring, because we're probably going to have
Fantastic.
to take the savings the next 2 years and push some of the debt out.
so you're saying it's a positive trajectory? or
Well, it's going to be
is
about
that-
$4 million for this year, and maybe about $1
In
million for next
savings?
year. In savings.
So we could use some of that?
We will.
Potentially?
but we don't get that until October.
We won't get that
So
until, yeah,
we
December.
take a risk. Thank you for explaining that or giving us that bit of information, because that will contribute to our decision now.
You know, one of the things that's happened over the years is they've got tightened down significantly on bonding, on the ability to have the bonds. So like, before, fast growth districts have what they call capital appreciation bonds, which would allow you to really basically pay interest and not pay the principal. And they took that away because it was being used so significantly. I inherited a school district that had 100% capital appreciation bonds and had to go restructure the whole entire amount of debt. It's not out of the woods in a minute, but we have to have as again, one of the things that we're doing this year is creating systems. And so we're going to have to go look back through, and we're going to give you wise. I can't do anything about the past, and I think that we've tried as hard as we could to get, and really, honestly, there's a lot of needs that we have here, but at the end of the day, we're going to get creative and work through this together.
Can I have a question about, we did our recent survey, our demographic survey that was a 10-year projection. Could that be a factor of maybe from the bond perspective? I mean, how much time, do we look at a 3-year projection? I mean,
I think if anything over a 5-year projection is just a guess. And I think even at a
and it
3-year
was.
projection in this situation is a situation that's narrow. But the other thing I'm to say is this, one of the
but that
things.
was 3 years ago.
I know, isn't it
Well, that's why we're
crazy?
here quarterly now.
We say 2
Yeah.
years is a crapshoot.
It's just really hard, but because though, one of the things that I think it's just important, and I think that there's nobody in the world better than Karen at getting this stuff done. And then what we're going to do too is though, work with our Zonda to actually have them help us with the demographics as far as growth and those kind of things on a quarterly basis, because it's that important. And then the second thing is that go back and look at what we can do, even from even rezoning and doing all those kind of pieces and parts of the puzzle, having them create the proposals and those kind of things, so we can be as value driven as we possibly can. And so there's a lot of different pieces of this puzzle. But the good part about it is we're going to be positive, and we're going to be deliberate, and we're going to be honest, and we're going to do the best thing for the taxpayer, best thing for these babies and these teachers, and for the hardworking folks that are making it happen, because there's some excited people about the school year.
Yes.
And they need hope, and we need to be hopeful. And
And I
we'll be able
want
to
to
do it.
thank you for that. That was a big deal. That was different now moving forward. Is we've only received one quarterly report of demographic data, and that was a huge missing piece in previous years. Albeit we've only really we've been through 2 bond cycles, but thankfully
Yeah.
Dr. Vincent brought that to the table and implemented it quickly so
And-
that we're up to speed on our demographics, because what's being presented now is far different than what was presented to us in 2023. So
Yeah, one of the things that, even relates to what we've done in the past, is building the design of how we build buildings and stuff like that. It's a lot of our master facilities plan, not a bond, but a master facilities plan that makes sure that we make wise decisions and then we work through these whole things together. But, y'all are smart people. Y'all have asked more questions of me in the last year than I've had in the last 10. So at the end of the day, I think that we can do a lot of really good things.
Good questions, right? Not just.
And I'm saying
you
good
insinuate
questions.
by
Ms.
questions,
Garza.
we didn't know the information, but we asked the questions to get the information.
Oh, no, the
we're
thing is
waiting
I
for.
love curiosity.
And I think it is interesting that there is a $2 million new instructional facilities allotment built into, I think we skipped over that, but, before bonds were a big deal, there were ways that we were able to sustain our buildings.
Yeah, they
and-
used
and
to do
function
all kinds of things.
to keep up with growth.
NIFA,
so.
they had all kinds of different things that have helped you, and even with regard to your debt service. But I mean, it just went away because of the fast growth of the Texas schools. How old am I now that we're talking about all that stuff, right?
I haven't seen state funding and debt in 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
Easily.
Are we, Ms. Garza, Mr. Roebuck, are we at a good point where we could take a pause real quickly? We've been at this for 2 hours and almost 15 minutes.
Okay, I've got maybe 5 or 6 slides left if we want
Are
to
you good?
finish. You guys good
All
to
right.
go?
I just had a request, so I'm asking.
Okay, all right. So here's our tax rate history again, with the proposed rate for next year. This is Houston area tax rate. We are in the yellow. You can see how we compare. The green bars represent our peer districts, and then the sky blue or Dodger blue bars, I guess you would call it, would be our Montgomery County district. So you can see how our tax rate compares.
It's Columbia Blue.
And I have
Sorry.
one more question. Before we move on to the next section, so it looks like this legislative session, the big push is going to be about property taxes, right? And so how does that all play into this is a heavy
No.
conversation, but we need to have it now.
I agree 100%. Karen and I were talking about this earlier. I don't know how they do this because we have obligation to pay the investors back. And we have a lot of debt outstanding in a lot of school districts across Texas. You see these bar charts here. A lot of that's not because of the M&O, that's because of the debt service tax rate, because they're all about the same, the compressed M&O tax rate. Where's that money going to come from to pay all that debt back? Is the state going to basically pay the district annual amount of money based on the amount of debt outstanding across, not just these schools, but the 1,090 school districts that have debt outstanding in Texas? I just don't see how that's going to happen. I mean, it may be something they.
Well, it sounds like it is the number one priority
It is.
this coming legislative
And-
session. It seems like Lieutenant Governor and the governor have two different kind of scenarios about what it looks like. Are you familiar with both of those? I guess, we're talking about today, and I hate to bring up, what's coming, but, I'd like to know what's coming a little bit if possible.
I've spent about 20 years of my life losing sleep over thinking about what the state's going to do each session, because it impacts everything that we do on a daily basis for my clients. And, what we're going through here is not a fun conversation. I wish I had an answer for you what they're going to do. Sales tax, okay, if that's the case, then we're going to have cost of goods go skyrocket. You're going to put a huge disparity between the wealthy and haves and have-nots if you do that. I don't think Texas is going to do a state income tax because that's something they pride themselves on. It's going to have to be some kind of luxury tax, maybe.
Or a rollback of all the tax abatements that they've given these large corporations that have come to our state in recent years.
Which will cause them to leave.
Maybe, but we could pay down,
Yeah.
the money's going to come from somewhere. It's just what end of the spectrum does it come from? I think that's the question right now on the table, and they are going to have to address it this session.
And I think from the debt service side I can speak to, they're not going to allow a school district not to pay their debt. I mean, that's an obligation that you have. That's a contract you have with investors, and if you don't pay it, then they will sue you.
That's not the question. The question is, where is the money going to come from?
Yeah, and that's, again, that's. for
It's there.
Lawmakers make that decision, not
Exactly.
me.
It's not necessarily something we're going to solve here, but we'll be there for the party.
You good? All right. Maintenance and operations revenue next year, this is the change that we're proposing local property tax increase of 1.03 in property tax revenue, state funding increase. The largest driver of that, of course, is our projected increase for special education, moving to that intensity-based model, and then teacher incentive and TRS on behalf. Those are pass-through items that you'll see on the expenditure side. So looking at our compensation plan, before we dive into compensation, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I think it's important to kind of recap what happened last year in the legislative session. While we are incredibly thankful for the $41 million that they gave us, you can see they provided $22.3 million for us to provide raises to teachers and support staff. So the teacher retention allotment was $19.6 million. And one of the caveats to how they distributed this money for teacher raises is that you had to give it all to teachers, and we've talked about this at length, that you had to give it all to teachers in year one of the biennium. So we were very intentional as a district last year as we were working through our compensation plan that we wanted to front load all of our employees, not just teachers, with as much as we could in 25-26, understanding that we would have no new money to give raises in 26-27. The state would maintain the teacher retention allotment that they gave in the previous fiscal year, but not give any new. So it cost us $21.2 million to provide that teacher raise. We did do some locally funded raise for those 1- and 2-year teachers that we chose to do beyond the $19.6 that we got. And then there are benefit costs that go along with providing a raise to our teachers, because the state will only contribute a certain amount to TRS, much like a 401k at a company. They'll match up to a certain percentage. Well, there's what's called a state minimum salary schedule. It's about $33,000. So anything that a teacher earns above $33,000, the district is required to make that state contribution to TRS. So that's where that $2.1 million benefit cost comes in to provide that raise for teachers. And then cost of support staff, because we wanted to front load that, cost us $12 million. So we spent $35.3 million on the raise that we received $22.3 from the state. So that is what put us in the situation that we were in this year, when we had to recommend the compensation plan to essentially stay flat on the teacher hiring schedule and not be able to provide raises for the rest of our employees.
Can you say that again? Because you said we front-loaded the raise for this year. So it was never a question, were we going to give a raise this year? Because we made sure that
we tried to give as much as we could in 25-26.
Exceeding
and that's
above and beyond
correct,
what we were given.
Correct.
So I just want to put that to rest, because there's a conversation that we didn't give a raise for this year. No, it's a biennium funding and it was accounted for when we gave it last year.
And someone alluded to why are other districts able to do it. There are some districts that chose to hold back some of, they had to do the teacher raise. That was mandated. You had to do all of that. But they held back some of their other money to spread that out over 2 years. Now, are they taking some of that second year money and then giving teachers even more than they got in year one? There are districts that did VADERs. There are districts that are adopting deficit budgets to do this. So there are a variety of reasons why districts around us are able to provide a raise this year.
But I just want to stop you. I don't know that our messaging was very good on that. I have to be honest with you. I'm not sure, because when we have our staff and they look at neighboring districts that they could go to, and I'm not sure that we did a great job on the messaging on that. That's just my take on it. I mean,
that's a good take, because there was an expectation that there would have been a raise this year, and that expectation should have never existed, because Misty, we were very clear last year when we gave the raise. It was understood.
Right.
I don't think it was. So, yes, I agree. Our messaging maybe fell short.
I have a question regarding the personnel changes. I don't know if that's going to be on this slide group. I'm working off of the draft board book. Do you have that slide, the 2026-27 personnel changes?
It's coming. These are a couple categories on our compensation plan that we are falling behind. There are many other besides these. These are two that are talked about often. Our bus driver pay as compared to our neighboring districts and the same districts looking at certified starting teacher pay. You can see I had alluded to earlier that our compensation plan in general needs to be addressed in terms of competitive pay for our employees. And like I said, these are just two categories where we're falling behind, and some of these on the list are giving raises for next year as well.
I don't know that that's necessarily like messaging. I mean, this is pretty solid fact to see that we are significantly lower.
Mhm.
But I guess to your point, we aren't taking on debt. But I've got another question when we get to another slide.
We're not falling back. We're spending money elsewhere. We're not falling behind. I mean, you're right. We've got to find out why we can't afford to increase pay for certain categories of employees.
Right, and just.
Because we're spending money elsewhere.
A 1% raise would cost us around $9 million, so it's expensive.
Absolutely.
And-
So, I mean, the reality is that what about 90%, give or take, is all goes towards employees' salaries and their
Right.
benefits.
Correct.
So if we wanted to give to what you just said, it would cost us about $9
$9 million
million for a 1% raise.
Correct.
For all of our staff,
Correct.
right? So if 90% of our budget is employee salaries, that other 10%, so something would have to go in that.
Correct.
In that 10%. That's our maintenance cost and different
Utilities,
things.
fuel.
Or if you can't get rid of that, then you got to go back to the 90%.
Right.
And then what that would mean, it would be a dramatic impact to our children because
Mm-hmm.
now we'd have to lose programs. Programs, that means the teachers would go. So we would,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, what does that say? You steal from Peter to pay Paul,
Rob
something
Peter to
like
pay
that,
Paul.
right? So we'd have to get rid of our employees to give other employees raises, unless we can come up with other creative ways to get revenue.
Which I guess is that connects to the question I had about the personnel structure. I don't know when you're going to get to it, but we did get rid of several positions to the tune, I guess, of $4.4 million. And those positions are gone. One would assume that they could be used for raises, but we use them in other areas, such as special education. It looks like it's a one-for-one trade whenever we do get to that personnel slide. I do want to note that, I've been personally asked, because I was a teacher, why are you not giving raises? And this information about the staff cuts and the decision to move it into special education occurred before I had any awareness of it. So then when I was faced with, do we give raises or not, I'm looking at what's left of that. I just want to state that on the record.
I think this is a good conversation to have. I like this conversation, actually. I think.
Can you go to that slide?
Yeah.
I'm
Can
sorry.
we move
To the staffing slide?
It's number
Okay.
32 or 31.
So,
It's
I mean,
next.
just a clarification, the instructional coaches and the district level coaches were redeployed, correct?
No, actually, several of them were they were redeployed back to the classroom.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then some of them actually were taking roles in our new restructure as far as that stuff goes. But
Okay, and
the
then-
majority of them went back to the classroom.
So, but this is a good point, though. So it's like a 1-for-1, right? So we
Right.
made this adjustment, and then we've added into special education staff. What does it look like if we don't add in that $4 million to special education staff? What does that look like for us?
Well, I will tell you that Kendra's needs were in the $19 million range, so we provided her what we could. Our initial allocation was $3.2 million, and then after looking at staffing and where there were critical needs, we came back and added some additional staff. So while 4.1 is a big number, to be fully staffed and provide the services that we need to provide, she needed $19 million.
And I don't disagree, but I think we're feeding into a category, the very category that's contributing to most of our potential deficits because of the unknown, whether they knew it beforehand or they're learning it as they go. But we're not taking money and putting it to other areas. We're spending it to
Be federally compliant.
fill a gap that was created by legislators, so that I'm just saying that, like, we're playing the game. Like, we're not.
I do have a
To answer your question, we're not addressing
Well-
needs because we're working to just tread water while we stay above, or keep our heads above water while there's this huge gap being created.
And I have a question related to the gap that you're describing. There was another slide in a presentation that you gave, I don't see it in this presentation, where we looked at the percentage of speech is down 5%, mainstream's down 5%, self-contained is down 2.2%, and other was down 1%. And I asked the question, did we remove these positions that, we no longer need? Now, dyslexia, that is up, right? But for these other positions, was there a decrease? And I was told no, with the homecoming plan, we just kind of dispersed them throughout. I do want to know, in kind of our special education discussions, that this was, for a lot of schools becoming a bit overwhelming to have so many students in one spot. So in a way, it's funding to enable, I guess, a better work environment for some teachers. So that's some of the questions that I've had. I don't know if that made a lot of sense, because I was just kind of.
Well, that last part was very, very significant. You're right, Trustee Horton, on that the campuses that were directly impacted by the large number of students being serviced on their campus were definitely feeling that, and by dispersing them, it helped with work, life, and as well as those students, getting them closer to home and to their campuses. So there was value in that. So you are right there.
Well, but I guess for clarification, and this might be for Dr. Wiggins, when we increased the staffing for special education, was there, because I think it's two different things. We have a significant increase in the amount of students that need to be serviced, which is, yes, there is the funding gap, but it is federally mandated that we have to provide these services. So it's not optional at any rate. And so, but the rate that is going up is the amount of students that are coming in. So is the increase of the staffing that we have that is on this screen, is it a direct correlation to the homecoming plan? Is there maybe a benefit? Was it done to suffice the need to distribute, our students to their home, or not distribute, but move our students back to their home campus?
Okay, so I want to answer a couple of questions. First, there isn't a decrease in speech. There was a decrease of speech only. So that particular category was just a speech only. So when it said that we went down in speech only, we went down to that, but we did not go down in speech services. In fact, we increased by needing about 10 speech pathologists to cover, because now students have multiple disabilities, so they would need speech. So that kind of, to clarify, speech itself didn't go down, just speech only students that only receive speech services. And then as far as that, if you look at the staff that we added, none of them are actually really related to the homecoming plan. All of the staff that we added was dyslexia teachers and assessment staff. So as a whole, the homecoming plan was spreading services out, but we would have, regardless of the increase of numbers, we would have added staff in general, because we look at ratios of students. So that's how we try to staff for students. So all of the FTEs that we added were not actually related to the homecoming plan. They're related for services. So the staff that we added were dyslexia teachers that we add, because we had dyslexia on all campuses. We don't have that clustered. And then also assessment staff. And we have assessment staff on all campuses as well. We don't cluster that as well.
So the additions were due to increase in number of students needing services.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
it is related.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily for one category,
special
but
education. Yeah, this is only like dyslexia they were looking at, but they just took the existing staff, even though there was lower numbers, and dispersed it to free up, I guess, some of the schools that were overwhelmed.
Right, but what you're saying is these additional FTEs were not as a result of homecoming.
No, actually, I mean, all of them were in areas of needs so none of them were related to clustering programs. So clustering programs like life skills teachers or behavior teachers were clustered programs. The staff that we added were dyslexia teachers, speech pathologists, school psychologists, and diagnosticians, which we have on every campus. So that actually didn't have an impact on that.
And another question about the additional FTEs for special education. What would have been the ramifications had we not invested in the special education staffing? What would the ramifications have been to the students receiving services, our staff, just overall?
As far as that is, federal mandates are federal mandates. So they don't really care if we have the money for them or not. We're required to do the services. So inevitably for that just means we do compensatory services, meaning that we still have the obligation, if we don't have the staff to do them, we have to have an IEP meeting and to discuss compensatory. So in some cases, we've had to do that in cases where we lose a staff member. But as far as that, federal mandates don't really care if you have the staff or not. You're still required to do the services. So we either have to do them on the backside in the summer or whatever, but we would have the same requirements regardless if we have the staff.
We'd have to find somebody and pay them to provide the services, because they're not part of our district, because we don't have the staffing potentially to
Yes,
cover
ma'am.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask about sorry, I don't want to change the subject. I'm just curious about the other support staff and
So-
then the contingency units, the other FTE positions. Can
Okay,
you
so
break those down?
contingency is just units we typically put into our budget to account for growth beyond where we projected. If we don't use those contingency units, that budget is available for us to reallocate next year. So we will not spend it unless we need it. And then the other operations staff, primarily, the two things in there that are included in that number are custodians for our 3 new buildings that are opening, and then police support for those buildings as well.
Trustee Horton, do you feel better about that now, or?
Oh, I didn't have any questions. I was just making a statement because I've been asked that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, I think it was a good conversation.
I don't
for
think
sure.
it was ever a question if we had to, if we're required to by federal mandate to give
Right.
services. That's never the question. We
Okay.
know that. We're just highlighting that the money we're spending
Right.
is related to particular categories.
All right, so this is our projected expenditure increase in the general fund. It matches the revenue increase of 7.59 million. You can see the categories. And then this is our budget all put together. And like I said, we are bringing you a balanced budget, total expenses of $769.65 million.
Thank you, Mrs. Garza.
You're
for that.
welcome.
I know that
And
was
your whole
hard.
team, thank you. You
Yes,
guys
thank
are
you.
amazing.
And I don't need to reiterate that, but I also want to thank this board. We take a lot of heat in the public of people saying we don't understand, we're not doing the right things, we're not asking the hard questions, whatever it may be. And I think tonight, these ladies proved they understand, they're working hard. Unfortunately for you, but we're asking a lot of, even behind the scenes, asking you a lot of hard questions. We ask and expect a lot, but I'm really very proud of them because, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, I mean, these are really smart and intelligent women that are paying attention and working hard for the people they represent, and I just wanted to say that, so.
But we're not done yet, right? You have more.
We have a little more.
Yeah.
No, I promise we're almost done.
That was a pre-close, but, you know.
I'll tell you, end it there, that's good.
Yeah.
So we are almost done. This is the format that we will bring the budget to you. We are required to adopt the budget by function for these 3 funds. And so this is the format that we will bring it to you on the 18th. And then just to share some information about peer districts and what their budgets are looking like for next year.
I mean, I would guess Cy-Fair has a lot in savings.
They do have a large fund balance,
Okay,
yes.
so,
But 80.9 million is a lot.
yeah,
That's a big deficit.
That is kind of weird, but.
And our
Go back 2 slides, sorry, one more. You see where it says the instructional and all that?
Mhm.
Will you tell the public, if you were to look at the budget, we don't get to see all the items on a printed budget.
Correct. It is tens of
It's
thousands of lines, yes.
Tens of
'cause
thousands of lines with 10-digit numbers.
They're 20 digits. We are
Oh, 20
required, we are
digits.
required by the state to account for things a certain way, according to the FAS reg, which is the Financial Accountability Standards reg. And yes, it's a very long budget code that we account for things, so we slice and dice things to the tens of thousands of lines. So that's why I say, when it takes a village to put this together, and I know you see big numbers on a screen, but there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into getting all of that budget where it needs to be.
And where it's all broken down.
Correct.
Is all those 10 and 20-digit numbers.
Correct.
So-
You guys are like seeing in the Matrix, right? I want to kind of, just before we leave the compensation topic, I mean, I alluded earlier, the compensation is literally keeping me up at night. And, you know, I've been on the board about 2 years now, and I've heard the TASB person come a couple of times and do the presentation, and it always tells us that we're off the median and that, you know, that we're off in our competitors. But I've never heard a plan. I've never heard how we're strategically going to fix that. I understand this is the hardest thing in the whole world to fix because I think we're running so lean. But I would really like to task us and to make this a priority. You know, our staff deserves it, and to any staff watching right now, I am sorry that I didn't talk about it, when we adopted and we didn't give a pay raise. I apologize. I should have said something. My gut said to say something. It wouldn't have changed anything, but I just want any staff watching to know that I do care about the compensation greatly. And I'm hoping that we can come up with, even if it's a multi-year plan, to figure something out to fix things.
One of the things that you and I have talked about at length, and I think that talked to one of you quite a bit, is that we need to have some objectives you have the goal for your staff retention to hire and attract quality folks and keep them, hire, attract, and retain. And so one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is look at compensation in the area and then try to set a percentage of where we want to sit as a school district. And to jump from where we are to the top 10% would be hard. But to get to 50, to get to 30, the top 30%, so we can look at that, we can start talking about how much it costs and those kind of things and do it very deliberately. And then also look at all the different amenities about, your insurance, all those different pieces and parts. And so to look at that whole package and to make it where they feel, I always say there's a difference between appreciation and value. Appreciation is getting a Snicker bar on Friday. Value is what you're actually going to be able to pay people for their value and their worth, and these teachers are working hard, and so are our maintenance and operations folks. So want to make sure we take care of them too.
I appreciate Trustee May saying that because, we have other strategic initiatives that we have. This should be one of them.
Yes.
Because you're right. I mean, we have to figure out, maybe it's a 3 to 5 year plan that gets us to a place that we are every year, it's part of our budget. We're not waiting on the state to give us money. Like, it's part of our plan. But you can only do that if you have a plan. And it's not easy when you are working. And I know our teachers work hard. They work real hard. Our administrators, everyone that supports the kids, are working really hard. And if you've ever not gotten a raise, it's not a great feeling. Or you've not gotten a raise and then your health insurance goes up. It's hard, right? And so, but if we're not focused on it, then we're not going to change anything. And it would be nice to get money from the state on top of what we already have budgeted for them. So I love that idea, and I think it needs to be our ongoing focus strategically.
Well, and I think that means making hard decisions too, right? Tightening our belt loop and kind of, we might have to say, maybe we don't need this, or maybe we're not going to do this. I will say, as a trustee, I don't feel I had access to any extra information that the average citizen has access to do all of this. I got the same presentation. I pulled the same things off of the website. So I don't know. I don't, I'm trusting the experts on this, and you guys are the experts, but I didn't have any extra information. I don't know what that means, but I'm just being very, very, very plain language about that. It did not have any extra information on this. So, if we have to make cuts, but, when we're talking about cuts, $9 million for the entire fleet, that's a huge cut.
And that's
so
for
we
1%.
That's for 1%, right? So I guess we would have to create a plan that is more tiered than, than that, correct? I mean, but
Yeah, well,
I don't see where we have a vision or a plan.
Well, the deal is we actually, in our personnel audit that we did, we have a phase 2 of this, and then we also have a phase 3 if we go back through and look at that presentation, which I'll send to you guys.
I was actually just looking at
And so
it.
that's one of the things that we can do insofar as but the cuts are more drastic, and the residual value of that would maybe get you a % raise, but I mean, we'll have to look and see what we're going to be doing with it. But the thing is this: we start with the first step, and y'all have spent the whole year evaluating, getting standards, getting things set, knowing where we are. We've got audits and situations now. We know where we're behind. We know what we need to do in a lot of different areas, including this. And so I'm really encouraged of the notion that we're all committed to this, and we've come together in this situation. Now we pulled all the weeds. Now we're going to try to find ways to plant some flowers.
Well, I think teacher incentive allotment is a big part of that.
It does cover that, and I think it's a real hard position to put you in and to put the district in, although I agree that a strategy has to be put in place, but you're talking about running that parallel to the time that we are completely increasing special ed funding. Like, that is the biggest contributor to these potential deficits that we're looking at coming
Yeah,
next
and
year. I'm not
legislatively,
seeing
that's one of the buckets that we're
I'm
going to be
not seeing a
addressing.
refurbishing of our money that we've spent until at least the 2027. So make it right, next year we won't know. So it's a really hard time to put into place, especially when legislative changes happen every 2 years. So by the time we get to make it right for the legislation they passed last session, we'll be a year into, or that could potentially be in 2028. And
Or that you make plans based on what legislation is at that time, and
Yeah.
then they change it.
Yeah.
so again, it goes back to my point about hitting the certain targets. It's just really hard, but I do agree a plan should be in place, but we have a lot of things happening simultaneously, and
Yep.
it makes it almost impossible to
When we
pin
look
things
back-
down.
When we look back at all the great things that have been accomplished in the last year, it is amazing. And with this group, it's not going to slow down, so we'll just keep going and making those improvements. So I'm thankful. It's also a little scary, but anyway, go ahead.
All right. So our legislative priorities, these, we've talked about this at the last meeting, but these are the 4 buckets that we're going to prioritize. And I know final decisions have not been made about all the details, but these are some of the areas where we know we've got funding gaps, compensation, school safety, special ed, and transportation.
And these are one of those areas that we are doing those kind of things.
Yes. So our fund balance analysis, as Dr. Vincent alluded to earlier, our projected budget at $769 million. Our floor, which is 20%, we would need to have $154 million in our savings account. We are projected to end this fiscal year at 146.9 unassigned fund balance, so we have fallen below our 20% target. We're about $7.1 million short of that. So this is an area of concern that Mr. Roebuck alluded to earlier with bond rating agencies. This is one of the things they're gonna be asking us about this fall when we go to refund these bonds. Like, what does your fund balance look like? What's your plan going forward? And
Are we
obviously,
going to explain to them about the overprojections that contributed to this?
well,
I would like for that explanation to be included. That is the largest $7 million bar I have
Yeah,
ever
proportion.
seen. That's a big one.
It still is 19%.
yes.
Yeah, 19.1.
0.1.
But it's 7 million, looks really big, but,
It looks much more dramatic.
right, I'm just saying, well, it's
But,
her
I mean, the
comment.
healthcare discussion will be, that's something we
Everything
talked to
ties
them about
together.
last year, that
It's
we
all
were
relative.
working to make that transition. So you look at this, had we not had to move $11 million to self-funded insurance, we'd be in a much
20
better
million.
position. You're right, 20 million over 2
20
years.
million.
Right,
So that looks totally different if we're not moving $20 million.
right,
And we didn't move it for anything else.
No.
It was this.
right.
What should our fund balance be at?
He said
1.21.
He said
Between 20 and
227 million?
25%. So this is 20% floor is 154 million, so.
I look at 3 months of operating
Do you
procedure.
have a-
So that's really,
Do you have a
that's more.
plan?
Well, and this is a projection. We may end the year a little better than this, but I mean, if we had not had to move that $11 million, we probably would have been adding a little bit to fund balance this year. So if we can get ourselves
Ms.
out of the
Garza-
healthcare business and start slowly building this back up. Now, as our budget increases, the 20% also increases as well. So it's kind of a moving target, but
But to that point, Ms. Garza, because we were just 5 short years ago in a position where you explained to me, and correct me if I speak incorrectly about any of the details, but we were putting $10 million aside every year into a capital improvements fund. So that very brief, like that was not that long ago. We were in a much different position.
yes.
So we as a district were stockpiling tens of millions of dollars into I think, correct me or tell me the annual number. I think it was 10 million a year.
We did
were-
10 over 5 years, so $50 million, yes.
So we had
But,
that
I mean,
10
the
million.
idea behind that is we were doing that in an effort not to have to borrow that money,
Well, I'm
right?
not-
So
and
it
I'm
was
not talking
money
about
we
the
had
reason.
available.
I'm just talking about the position we were in to do that, no matter the reason.
Correct.
We had 10 million to spend. Or
Correct.
10 million extra. So where did that go?
Well,
like what-
it went to the,
No,
it
no,
went.
I mean, year over year, we were doing that. So at some point, we stopped doing that, right?
Correct.
So what happened that year? What year did we stop doing that?
I think it was 2 years ago that we moved the last of that $50 million. So as our budget has increased, our stated goal has increased as well, and then our capacity to add to fund balance has
But did funding
essentially.
decrease?
Funding overall did not decrease in terms of
So we
overall
were still
funding.
getting that same,
You were living off growth.
Right.
That's pretty much it in a lot of ways, and that's where we are,
Yes.
so that you could actually live off growth, and so when you do that each and every year.
so you're
you have the
saying
capability-
because we stabilized with our numbers?
Yeah, now you got the check at the end of the meal, like I always say. You know? And I mean, that doesn't put it really bluntly. But the thing is this, we're going to have to look at this and just go and work through it, but where we're at.
And that's my point. Like, these are things we can foresee, or we can, I mean, it happened quickly, right? Like, almost
Yes.
overnight.
It
Where
does.
we went from 1 year, we had 10 million, to now we're deficit 27.
Yep.
We're at that point where we operating at a $35 million,
Well, I mean,
transportation.
$20 million hit over 2 years is significant, I mean, for the health plan. 'Cause that's an issue we didn't face the 5 years leading up to the last 2 years that we had to move money last year and this year. So that's
Yeah, y'all caught up with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we done?
Yeah.
we done?
I think we're done.
Thank you.
Okay, so before everyone, I'm afraid they're going to start throwing the chocolate I gave them at me if I state this. We have one public speaker. Do you think we can let her go?
Let's do it.
Okay, so, well, she said it had to do with, she doesn't need it, so, then I would propose, first of all, we've already said all our thank yous and great job, sorry, I don't mean to disregard you, but we're now going to move on to the public speakers who have registered to address the board. As a reminder, speakers will be called in the order in which they are registered. Ms. DeFerraria, DeFerrari, did I say that right? Each speaker will have 2 minutes to address the items on today's agenda because it is a special meeting. While trustees generally do not respond or engage in dialogue during citizen participation, we do carefully consider the comments we receive. And I would say Ms. Spurlock called our first speaker, but we all know who it is, so there we go. Robin DeFerraria.
In light of, well, good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Robin DeFerrari. In light of the budget discussion already happening this evening, this is a bit backwards, but relevant to long-term retention. I'm here to respectfully ask the board to reconsider its decision regarding raises. In the spring, 2 options were presented, and you adopted the one that was most restrictive. I understand that budgeting is complex and that every financial decision involves difficult trade-offs. However, the people who educate, support, and care for our students deserve compensation that reflects the value of their work and allows them to maintain a constant standard of living. In addition to the lack of raises, new insurance premiums on the new plan will cost teachers more, and other benefits have been removed, effectively further decreasing take-home pay. As I helped several teachers move into new classrooms this week, I was reminded how much stuff they buy out of their own pockets to support their classrooms. As a PTO board member for the past few years, we worked hard to provide teachers with additional classroom supplies and resources out of our budgets, not theirs. No other career is like this. Teachers and staff continue to take on growing responsibilities while meeting higher expectations every year. They invest countless hours preparing lessons, supporting students, communicating with families, and helping schools succeed. Competitive raises are not simply an expense, they are an investment in retaining experienced employees, attracting talented professionals, and providing students with the consistency they need to thrive. Already, we have lost far too many valuable teachers and staff. When employees feel valued, morale improves, turnover decreases, and our entire school community benefits. Choosing to revisit raises sends a clear message that this district recognizes the dedication and commitment of the people who make learning possible every day. I respectfully ask the board to take another look at the current plan and explore every reasonable option to provide fair and meaningful wages. Our educators, staff, students, and community deserve a district that invests in the people who make a difference every single day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you sharing those thoughts with us today. We will pick up consent agenda when we come back. We're going to take a brief break and is 10 minutes okay for y'all? So we can keep moving? All right. So we will come back at approximately 8:05. Both clocks are at the same time, so 8:05. The time is 8:11, and we are back in session. Our next item is consent agenda. The items included on the consent agenda are routine matters that have been reviewed in advance by the board and may be considered together through a single motion. Before we consider the consent agenda, there has been a request to remove items D and E, the two interlocal agreements, for further discussion. Aside from those, are there any other items to be removed?
Thank you for removing those at my request.
All right, any others? All right, seeing none, noting the removal of D and E, is there a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of accepting as presented minus D and E, show by the uplift of hands. Okay, motion carries. Now we will go and address item D. Consider and approve the interlocal agreement with Harris County Department of Education for music therapy to provide required IEP services for students. Dr. Landry, do you have anything you want to share?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Vincent, this is an interlocal agreement. These are agreements that are made between governing bodies. So we're bringing these in front of you because it's really an agreement between you and Harris County Department of Education. These are services that we have used consistently in the past for several years, and it's just an agreement that we're bringing to you.
Thank you.
Dr. Landry, first I want to thank you for giving me additional feedback on both items D and E after last board meeting. And I want to thank Dr. Vincent again for conversations we've had, and had multiple conversations with community members, parents, therapists, those familiar with these services, and just want to say that I am comfortable, of course, agreeing to have these services rendered, but I do want to keep the discussion going on maybe getting these offered locally here in Montgomery County for us and other districts. So.
Did you want to take up D and E together, or do you want to keep them separate?
Yes, that's fine.
Could you give me a motion for that?
A motion to approve items D and E that were pulled from the consent agenda.
Can I ask a quick question? Because I was also interested and I thought you might pull it. For E, when I was looking at the presentation that you sent us.
Okay, could we finish the vote that's there, and I'll come back to you for discussion.
Okay.
The motion that was there. So I have a motion on the table to accept D and E as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Please go ahead now, sorry.
So my question was, it says that it is for evaluation, the music therapy, but then I think at the other meeting, we were told that it was to provide service that these kids needed because of their IEP. Is it for the evaluation or is it for the service?
Okay. Hi. It is for the evaluation. Because typically what we do is when we have staff that do evaluations, or when we don't also have them do the services, because we do a checks and balance, because potentially them adding evaluations, add services could add the cost of them doing services. So we typically split those off. So the Harris County Department of Education is for evaluation specifically. We use someone locally there's a few that we use locally for music therapy itself. And the reason also in Harris County is pretty far. So most of the people that are using that are in the Harris County area, about a 45-minute drive. So they do the evaluations there. They send staff to do the evaluations. It's only a couple of days where our music therapy is done.
Okay, so only evaluation services, and we send the students to Harris County for these evaluation services?
They come into the school. So we have staff that come into the school for the evaluation. Like they send staff and they contract through there, but they're kind of like a hub of contractors that work for Harris County, and they come and do the evaluation. So they come to the school, and then if students receive music therapy, it's at school. typically music therapy is done within the classroom. They actually aren't pulled out, they work with the teacher, and they have goals and objectives that they're working on together.
And we're required to evaluate with music therapy. Oh, no.
Sorry.
We're required to evaluate with music therapy.
It's not like a part of a full individual evaluation for every student, but there is certain students that they're looking at music therapy. So not all of our students are evaluated for that, but there are some students that we look at music therapy evaluations.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that question because I understood it in reverse. I was under the impression that we were evaluating the students internally and then they were receiving services through the Harris County Department of Education's facility. So we're not actually transporting students to
Well, we are
receive.
not for music therapy.
Not for music therapy, for behavior, that's separate. Maybe we should have kept these separate for discussion. But for the music, we're allowing Harris County Department of Education to evaluate and identify students for music therapy service.
Yeah, because we only have about 20 students that receive that, so we actually don't have enough for a staff member. We wouldn't, like, as far as cost-wise, because, like, as far as the evaluation, our contract's only for about $5,800 is what we're using for the evaluation piece of that.
For them to evaluate, but we are able to provide the service internally in Conroe ISD.
We contract the services because
But someone
it's
comes
not-
into our district.
Yes, but it's not the same group that does that. It's different people that do the therapy.
Okay, is this a therapy that we're going to eventually, are we going to continue this therapy? Because Dr. Landry, you and I discussed this after the last meeting where this music therapy, is this something that we see continuing as well, no, just continuing, because the way I understood it was that it was almost phasing out.
Well,
Maybe I misunderstood.
There isn't I mean, there's not a lot of students that have music therapy, but we as a district don't get to decide that. The IEP decides that. So when they're in the IEP, what you typically see is students that's struggling with your typical instructional practices of working towards goals, and they're not seeing progress. So they've brought in music, and so they're working on non-music goals, like they're working on reading and different things, using music as part of that. So it's a pretty small niche as far as that, but we as a district don't get to decide, like, we're not going to do music therapy. It's the IEP that determines
Well, that's the
that.
evaluation, right?
But would it
Right,
be in the
they're an
IEP if we didn't include it in the evaluation?
No. Well, if we didn't have.
So
I mean,
an
you can still
IEP
put it in an
asks for the
IEP without having
evaluation.
been evaluated with it.
So my question is, we're approving the Houston, or the Harris County Department of Education to come in, or to provide the evaluation only. They get to determine if we don't have anybody internally that could do that evaluation?
No, there's certain qualifications for it, and we don't have music therapists in the district.
Well, meaning that the music therapist is the one that provides said evaluation. So these folks are simply determining if our students are going to receive this therapy within our district.
Yes.
So we have someone within the district capable of providing the service, just not evaluating the student.
We contract a different person for
Right.
that.
Who do we contract for that?
There's like 3 people, and I don't have them off the top of my head. It depends on year, because sometimes they switch. They're very hard to find. So we're in the process right now of working on a contract for that. Because it's really probably only about sometimes an hour a week of services collectively. So there may be 1 or 2 hours. So when you factor that in, potentially it's like 4 hours a month.
Is this something
for all the
that's,
students.
sorry for the interruption, is this something that's typically requested the child be evaluated for? Or what's the determining factor on having the evaluation?
So, I mean, it's an IEP that determines that. So the ARD committee would determine that. So they're looking at lots of factors. I am not a music therapist expert by any means.
But no, I'm building up to that point. I'm not accusing you of being.
So as far as that, like all of the details of that, I can definitely get that to you. But the IEP determines that, and what typically you see is that they're not making adequate progress on their goals and objectives with our typical teaching strategy. So we always are looking at lots of strategy in different ways, and they've seen that music has been a good resource or something to help increase their progress on their goals.
So there's a good success rate with this therapy?
Yes, I mean, they're making progress, yes, on their goals and objectives for it.
Well, I think it's worth noting that if If it is determined that a child needs music therapy as part of their IEP, then that's what they get as part of their IEP, right? So, this evaluation has, if it's deemed as part of going through the process that this would be a good therapy for them to obtain, then we go and send them to this evaluation to better understand what they need in terms of that particular therapy.
So you're saying someone could put it in, they could put it in their IEP, and then the evaluation occurs, which could determine they either need it or not.
It's usually opposite, right? So their
Evaluation determines the
right.
services.
The evaluation determines what the needs are. So through that determination, they sit down, the ARD committee, which is everyone at the school that's part of the ARD committee, including the parents, sit down and say, okay, this is what we found as part of the evaluation. A recommendation is made for music therapy because this would help them achieve said goals. Then an additional, evaluation needs to be done for the music therapy. At that point, once it's deemed that that's what's needed, then it gets added to the IEP. The IEP is all the services that the child is going to get once it's been determined after the evaluation.
And forgive me, I don't
No, that's
have
okay.
special
Absolutely.
That's okay.
expertise, so I depend on these ladies and I appreciate them. So you did answer my question. So it is determined by the ARD committee that this therapy would be a potential service that the child needs. Then the evaluation's done, deemed, okay, yes, this is a therapy that could benefit the child. Then it's brought back and then added to the IEP.
Right, kind of like if they needed speech therapy.
That was
if
just
they
a
needed
really long
Yeah.
direct
So
circle we
all
went
those
there.
things, all those different types of therapies are done by the ARD committee after the evaluation is done, and then they decide, okay, now we need to do this. Now we take the next
Okay,
steps.
thank you for that clarification.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about the ABS West? I was accidentally sent the same slide twice.
that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. But I had a question, like how many students were served with the ABS West last year? I got the numbers for the music therapy, but I didn't get that one.
So
16,
I think we ended the school year. So what happens with ABS West is that we buy seats. And so we sometimes have more students served than the seats we have because like a student, because it could be fluid. So if a student starts making adequate progress to come back to the district, we still have that seat and they're replaced potentially by another student. So I think overall last year we had 12 seats, but we served 19 students, meaning that some came and went. It just depended on the year. Sometimes we have move-ins and they move out. If a student comes to us, like for instance, I just already received a student coming from another district that's transferring to us in a non-public day school. So we purchase seats. So we are upping our amount of seats for this coming school year based on needs of what we're looking at in the district and projecting. So we're upping it to 20 seats. The reason for this is we probably have about 6 students that's kind of in the process of potentially moving towards that need as we're looking through our continuum of services.
Do you think any of that need could be met with the homecoming plan? We're already giving a little bit more specialized attention by kind of lowering that ratio, right? By putting them across campuses. So it seems like kind of doubling up on what we're doing in terms of services. We haven't really tried one to the fullest.
So we do actually, the students that we're talking about are students that we have passed a self-contained model. So typically when we're into this, because in order to go into a non-public day school, it has to be approved by TEA. So even after we have the ARD meeting, the IEP meeting, it goes to TEA for approval that they've reviewed. We've done everything within the district to move to this very restrictive setting. And so as part of our district process for that, when we are even looking at that, we are actually in the classroom and we have district staff. So at that point, we're typically at a 2 to 3 staff members per 1 student ratio. And so when we get to that point is when we're looking at a non-public day school. So we are using the continuum. So in a homecoming plan, we do that whole continuum, but these are students that we've already self-contained fully. And typically, we're looking at potentially 30 to 40 violent, aggressive behaviors that we're seeing per day.
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Broussard. Thank you for Dr. Vinson for bringing this to the table and having this discussion. This will be the first year that we've discussed and voted on these 2 particular interlocal agreements, and I think that's really important to highlight again for the public to know that it's not about removing the services or holding back services. It's about understanding what we're paying for because this is very costly. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And actually, that is one of the things that, based on policy, Mr. Broussard has identified in seeing, as well as Ms. Ashley back there, have been saying that these are things that the board should be looking at. So thank you both. And we've agreed to not put any of them in consent agenda in the future. We're just going to, especially since they're the first times. So thank you.
First time to be brought to our attention, yes.
To our attention.
I would like to echo one of the reasons that you originally put it on here was because it is out of county, and there, when I did some research, it does appear that there are similar services offered in Montgomery County, and we are paying out of county tuition.
I was told there were not services offered here in the county that were comparable to the ones that are being received in Harris County. Is that right or wrong?
Well, so there's a lot of factors that go into that. So there is a list of non-public day schools that are approved by the state. So every non-public day school has profiles of students. So we actually do utilize we utilize base services for certain students. So we have to look at different services, and those schools also take the profile of once we, like if we have a student that qualifies for a non-public day school, then we send that profile and find the best fit. So not all of the schools do equal services. So we have to, so we do like use bays. I don't know if, are they in Huntsville's not, is that in Montgomery County? Okay, well, I don't know that, but that's I don't know of another one I don't know of one that's in Montgomery County.
I was
that I'm
told there were
aware of.
none in Montgomery. I
I've
was
not
told
heard
about
of
the one
any
in Huntsville,
Montgomery
and I was aware of this one in Harris because
Yeah,
of this
because there is a
agreement.
list, it's on TEA. I had sent it over to Dr. Benson, just so they have it, but it's on the website, but it's an approved list by TEA of all the ones in the state. I think in the state of Texas, it was close to 26 total that's in the state that's approved to use.
Well, I did look, and it seems that most every, and Tomball is sending to ABS.
Yeah.
We are at the New Caney as well.
Yeah.
So it appears that if we're on the
For
southern
those
tip,
specific services, for those specific things, because it gets so specific.
if they're
what you're
needed,
gonna be able
right,
to do,
if you have
because
students.
those are needed. And so you can go to Huntsville, which is going to be more expensive and farther away. So that was
Yeah.
right.
And they don't take, like, it just depends on the profile of students. They also have to accept them, and so they have limited spots as well.
Again, yeah, just lots of concerns, lots of answers to the concerns that we brought up, so thank y'all.
Are we ready to vote? All right. All those in favor of accepting items D and E, our two interlocal agreements, as presented on the original consent agenda? I don't want to have to read the whole listing of what they are. Are you all good with that? Okay, those in favor of accepting them, please show by the uplift of hands. And the motion carries 6-0. All right, moving on, we've done D and E now. We're on to administration. And Dr. Vincent, are you the one presenting on this?
Yeah, I am.
one?
You know,
Okay.
guys, we've had at least 16 forensics audit, PNC audits since 2010. I gave you a packet that had that, that's in your, I'm sorry I didn't get that to you earlier. But we've been conducting an audit that were basically forensic audits, which is we're done with the project and then we're moving on. And now we actually embarked on conducting an audit for a project during the construction. And so, you know, it's been helpful to have that. And so we're requesting that we get our friends at HPM Construction to expand that sampling to a different projects, including other contractors. And so talking to Vince at HPM, he said that could range from $22,000 to $55,000 in terms of those additional projects. And so it's our recommendation that we provide that additional opportunity for us to expand that audit service.
I'll go this direction because our chairwoman of the Audit and Finance Committee, do you want to
Can I
begin?
make a motion first?
Oh,
and then-
sure.
So I make a motion to approve the amendment to the HPM construction audit contract for a total cost not to exceed $55,000.
Do you, okay, do I have a second?
A second.
Do you want us to delegate Dr. Vincent to negotiate it and authorize it, or do you just want us to go ahead?
Yeah, I can clarify.
Okay.
So, in the board packet, it says $26,000, but you just mentioned it could go up to 55. So I
Yeah, I
just wanted
talked
to
talking to
make
Vince
sure-
on Friday. I just wanted to make sure that we had all of them covered.
Not
Because
to
there's some
exceed
different things.
that, right?
No, not to
But
exceed that.
obviously to
No.
nego-
I just
to
don't want to have to come back to you again.
May
I think it's-
I ask for an amendment to that, to authorize him to deal with it going forward as far as making those decisions?
Sure.
Authorize or negotiate those? Okay.
Are you going to make the amendment? I
Just-
withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. So can we make a new motion to authorize the superintendent to negotiate and enter into the agreement with HPM regarding the amendment to the original contract?
Yes, so I would like to make a motion to authorize the superintendent to negotiate and execute a contract with HPM Construction Audits.
The amendment contract?
The amendment contract.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I have a few questions because I just learned of this audit in a board brief, and it wasn't one that was on our agenda originally. I'd like to know, before we proceeded with this audit that occurred outside, I guess, of the meetings, did we do an RFP or did we look for other bids on the audit? I've requested that in emails. I have not gotten anything, so my assumption is no.
So I had a few comments that I wanted to make. As the audit committee chairman and formal internal audit, my mouth is getting dry, y'all. Formal internal auditor myself, I am in full agreement with Dr. Vincent on expanding the scope of the construction audit. Let me be clear, this is about transparency, accountability, and our fiduciary responsibility. Allow me to give some context. So over the last almost 20 years, the district has passed almost $3.64 billion over 4 bond packages. 2023 alone accounted for $1.9 billion of this, and it's considered the largest bond in district history. You better believe that with that dollar amount that we're going to verify that funds are being used appropriately. Frankly, it's common sense, but it's more than that. It's actually our responsibility under Texas Education Code 11.151 to oversee the funds of the district and ensure our fiscal accounts are audited annually. Because the $1.9 billion is such a large dollar amount and construction projects are complex, I believe it is important to bring in qualified, independent, keyword independent, third parties who specialize in construction to conduct these audits. The entire audit committee has been in agreement on the course of action since we started talking about this in January. We were all in agreement on HPM. Paying 0.0063% of the total bond to do these audits is minuscule compared to the value they will provide. Dr. Vincent, our internal auditor, and the committee has been transparent with the rest of the board and the public about these plans for months now and has conducted this in alignment with board policy. You can go watch our audit committee meetings online from January and May. They are recorded. But the bottom line is this: it's our fiduciary responsibility to audit. Taxpayers deserve to know how their money is being used. This is why we were elected, and I intend to fulfill my promise to be a prudent fiscal steward of this district.
Thank you. That didn't answer my question, though. I asked if we did any sort of any bids come in for it. I did watch the audit committee meetings, and I never saw this audit come up. And I have spoken with Trustee Simler, who said she was not made aware during the meeting about an audit.
That is not true.
Yeah, it
That
was
is factually.
it was actually
in
our
meetings.
board brief in the April board brief.
Yes, it was in the April
It was
board
communicated.
brief.
Yes.
Yes, it was sent in an April board brief that Trustee Dawson had an engagement. I assumed it would come then to the entire board to vote on how we were going to proceed, if we were going to take that committee, or sorry, that auditor, or if there was another auditor. It never did, and that's what led us to this point, and we had it in closed session at the last board meeting, and I did ask that instead of taking that vote in closed session, that we take it here.
So here we are.
Actually, we were asking if we could just allow the superintendent to continue
And you
through
asked
with
if
it.
everybody would agree to it, and I said no.
And that's why we're here.
I don't think we're supposed to take votes in closed session.
We're not taking.
We weren't taking a vote. We asked
Everybody
if,
agreeing to it is
we
a vote.
we asked that according to our policy, if there are 2 trustees that want to bring something to a board vote that is a legal question in executive session, then we do it, and that's what we did. We were just making it, we were asking in closed session, because of the sensitivity of what we were doing, if Dr. Vinson, if everyone would be okay for Dr. Vinson to go ahead and continue entering into the discussions with HPM.
My question still is, did we take any other bids? All I ever saw was in the board brief what trustee Dawson sent.
If I might,
Okay.
one of the things that we did, there were 4 different organizations that were considered, and it's a professional service, and so that you don't
Who
take a bid with that.
considered it?
I guess the entire, I think it's the entire group of folks, yeah.
Mr. Broussard, I know that Ms. Burns is not here because she's out of town right now. Can you tell how or Ms. Garza, could you tell us how those names came to be? Because we weren't involved in that part.
No, I don't know about the whole process. I do know about HPM because whenever someone asked me, I think it was I always say her name wrong.
Amy Burns.
Burns and Barnes.
I know,
It's-
it's hard.
Okay, so I'm not the only one.
It's not
spelled in
Okay,
a
I'm
different
sorry, I'm
way.
not trying to make light, I always, but anyways, she just approached me about that specific vendor. I had a conversation with them, just, making sure that they would qualify for a professional service. They have CPAs on staff, they do forensics audits or what have you. I felt comfortable that it was a professional service, and that was kind of where.
But to be clear, someone went and asked Ms. Burns to come up with names, because I asked this question.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in that, I don't think.
Because
but
there
I
were
can
4
recall.
names there were 3 names given to us, and the 4th was HPM.
And that could have been back when Mr. Hayden was here. I remember some conversations about that, and there was like, hey, if we wanted to do one, do we have any firms that might, me personally, of where my involvement may have been, that
Okay,
was
thank you.
quite a
I just
while
wanted to
back.
be sure that we put out that there were 4 companies
Yeah,
considered.
like I said, my only is the conversation regarding HPM specifically with her and qualified.
Thank you very
To go
much.
back to something you said, but
Yes.
for a professional service, an RFP isn't required?
No.
Okay.
No,
So-
because you're hiring off of qualifications.
Right.
And so there are certain
Okay.
services. Now, we are doing an RFP for construction consulting that you all requested.
Correct.
Because it is so specific, right?
Right.
You can't have a person that's just doing like, you may have somebody that is qualified to do a construction audit because they're a CPA, right? Or they have CPAs on staff, they're qualified in that. But you may also have companies that are well qualified to do, and we'll just stick to construction audits, but they don't qualify as a professional service because they don't have the right personnel, staff,
Correct.
things of that nature. So, like, you couldn't hire that person to do consulting for you. And one of the things that Dr. Vincent has talked about is the big master plan, I'm sorry, am I saying that right, sir? The
Master facilities plan,
planning
yeah.
and all that. And so when I was hearing about all of this, I just approached him about potentially putting together a bid, because you want to be able to have the services in place, not when you want to do them, before you need them.
Okay, so that required the RFP, but the external auditor didn't, because it
No,
was a
ma'am.
different
And we did
situation.
request services for auditing as well. Now, exactly if you just pulled out auditing, because in that, again, the reason why we have auditing in this bid is because not every person that could perform an audit was qualified, would qualify under professional
Thank you.
services. So.
That it was just to answer her question, is why I
So
asked.
Yes,
you
yes,
had
ma'am,
4
I'm
that
just-
came forward, and as the audit committee, you voted on HPM?
We didn't have to vote on it.
We all agreed.
Well, no, this is what we need clarified. I believe you're asking, would this have required a full board vote? And the answer I received was no, because of the dollar amount. It was under, or it was a service, it was a professional, what did Mr.?
And the aggregate would now be over.
Well, so.
You called it as a particular
So the
service.
aggregate didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So in the board policy, it must go into the board, well, it doesn't say in the board policy that it must go into board brief. That's our method of communication, right? So we put it into the board brief because it's a non-routine service, professional service, right?
Professional
So
service.
I'm trying to definitely follow, believe me, I'm embracing 100% the new policy. So if it follows that, then it would be, if it wasn't pulled out, then it would have just gone through, or, at that point in time. Now, what happens is, in that specific CH local policy, it states that the board member, one or more, would contact the superintendent that they want to have it pulled out. From there, if you all decided to pull it out, my interpretation is then it would become a board item for approval or not approval. So, and if I can say something on this, Mr. Stewart brought to you, I think it was the Parent Square or what have you. He chose to bring that to you. So that was why when I got up and I said it doesn't require action, because Mr. Stewart just wanted to communicate it. It wasn't because board members asked it. So
The bottom line for me is we followed CH policy. We have been transparent. We have communicated with the board, with the public. I think my bigger question, Trustee Horton, is why are we focused so much on the auditor and not our fiduciary responsibility to audit? Do you not believe we have a fiduciary responsibility?
I absolutely
to audit?
do, and I would have loved to
Well, then
have
why aren't we
voted on an
focusing on
auditor.
that?
I was not given the ability to do that.
Here we are right now.
My question for you guys is why the engagement letter was sent to you, Trustee Dawson, and why the contract was signed by President Odenweller. Why didn't you sign the contract? Why didn't an employee sign the contract?
I can only tell you what I was told. Do you have that folder of documents I signed?
Because she's the board president.
Yeah,
So as far as the signature of Trustee Odenweller, now what I can tell you is typically contracts are signed by, it would be the superintendent or designee. All I can go again is off of what feedback I gave, which was when I was approached about it of, hey, who should sign the professional services contract? I said, well, if the audit committee or the board is requesting it, then my recommendation would be the board president. That was where it left my office. I never had any other discussion regarding it. And again, that was just a recommendation because as we're approaching this new ground like you all are talking about, it is things we need to talk about. Is it you all give the direction of these are the audits that we want to take place and then we go ahead and handle it internally or what have you. But like I say, I can only speak to what I said. So.
Well, I mean, and when we were notified via the board brief, I mean, it did say who the company that was selected. We've had opportunity to discuss this, with you, Dr. Vincent, if we had questions or if we wanted to bring, which we did last time, right? So that's why we're talking about it today. But we've had ample time since April to have these discussions. And if there was objections, we had the means to do that as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will give some clarification.
Would you introduce yourself because you're new?
Sorry, my name is Ashley Shelley. I am the Director of Legal Operations. So I am here to help facilitate our contracts through the district. So we're creating processes so we'll know what's going to the board, what's going to the district, so we can follow the new policy, making sure that contract that is non-routine is getting in your board brief. If it's something that I believe that you all need to see, I put a pause and say, hey, let's get this to the board. So this amendment came through, right? And when I looked at it, the first thing I saw was that the board president had saw it, and I was like, traditionally, it was a non-routine because we already had a contract on file at that time, right? But I was like, I think it's best practice to put it back in front of the board for the amendment because I knew it had came out of the audit committee because I did go watch the video so I could see, and then I checked with the district. It was in the April board brief, but I was like, just for best practices, since the board president signed the contract, I think it's best practice that we put it back in front of the board. So your motion, putting it back to the superintendent will make sense because if we negotiate it anymore this way, we will handle it in-house, but that's how it made it back to you. I solely sent it back to the board myself because the board president's signature was on it. So I was like, if we're gonna be consistent, we're gonna keep this flowing. So that's how it made it back to you guys.
Thank you for that.
Again,
I would agree.
like
I would prefer that the superintendent sign any contracts moving forward. I know we've approached this topic already with the TEE contract, and I think it was assumed that the board president wouldn't go and sign additional contracts that we were leaving with the district. Unfortunately, that wording was said only as related to TEE, but I would like to state publicly, I guess we don't have a motion for this now, that I would prefer that the district sign all of our contracts moving forward.
The district isn't going to sign all the contracts because if the board vote, for instance, those interlocal agreements that we just passed tonight, the board president is going to sign them.
If there is a board vote, we did not vote as a collective board on that.
Correct, you're right. Moving forward, there will be no signatures from our board president unless there's a board action item to it. I'm here, I can make sure that's happening. So trustee Odenwell, when you're signing stuff with Portia, you will see that I will have the agenda in front of you, so you can be confident that there's an agenda item that's with that, so that we're all covered. I think that's just the processes was being a little dropped a little bit, but we have a plan, we're all in place.
I think this is a good segue to just restate the amendment. and
Hold
I'll
on one
add in-
second. I just want to make sure we're clear. I only signed it because it was deemed it was the appropriate thing for me to do. It had been evaluated, and that is why I signed it, along with a number of other documents I sign
Correct.
every month.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the motion is to give Dr. Vincent permission to amend and sign the contract with HPM up to or not to exceed $55,000. That's the motion.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All those in favor show by the uplift of hands. The motion carries 6-0.
Can I just say one last thing? I don't want to discuss, but I just want to tell you, Dr. Vinson, that I'm really excited about the audits, all that we've been doing. There's been a lot of great information from.
That's weird. That's cool.
Yeah. He knows I like data, but
Yeah.
I think it's important. You know, anybody that steps into a role like you did, you stepped into this huge organization, right?
Mhm.
And you sat back and you said, you know, I could take everyone's word for it, but let's bring somebody else who's not in the weeds, right? Because sometimes we can't see, right, from the forest, from the trees. Is that how it goes? And but I value that, because what it's done is it's shown us areas for improvement. It shows us efficiencies, things that we can do better. And at the
Thank
end of
you.
the day, making sure our kids get the best experience. So
Thank
I'm
you.
very thankful that you've taken
I
this
am
approach.
as well. I don't think that gives us permission to start directing on our own where we'd like to see these audits happen. I think that needs to be a board vote moving forward.
No one's directing on their own, but I think we are moving on from this agenda item.
Okay, the one thing I will just say, Dr. Vinson, is thank you for spearheading those, because in 10 months, I mean, we still have a couple more to go, but in 10 months, a brand-new outside superintendent, it's the first time, I think I was talking with Dr. Klepesky about this the other day,
She'd know.
first time in decades that we've had someone from outside the district, and you had to have a quick overview of things. So thank you for taking action on
Thanks
that.
for all 6 of you for trusting me with it. It's been an awesome
So
experience.
seeing no further business this evening before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? And we are out. The time is 8:48.
Yeah, that's good.